your feet beneath the cities we know, beneath the quiet sigh of soil and stone. There are other places, other homes, other dreams. Not all endings are loud, most are not. Civilizations rarely go out with fire and roar. More often they settle into the ground like old breath. And the world, so patient and vast, begins the slow work of forgetting. Somewhere in the cracks between roots and clay lie the remnants of people who once whispered stories into their night skies, who carved symbols into stone not for gods or kings but for time, hoping perhaps to be remembered. They gathered by rivers that no longer flow. They planted fields where forests now grow thick and wild. And they built homes, proud, sturdy, hopeful, which the earth one handful at a time. Not all mysteries are born from drama. Some are born from stillness. Some simply slipped away. A village that didn't wake up one spring. A temple left empty one winter too long. A people who turned a different way and never came back. We live on top of these echoes. Cities rise where other cities once stood, layers pressed like pages in a forgotten book. And the earth remembers, not with words or records, but with weight, a kind of soft gravity that holds on to what was. Here in this space between memory and dust is where our journey begins. You are not alone tonight. You are walking through time. Imagine the pulse of a distant drum, faint and slow. It could be thunder, or it could be the echo of a dance long since stopped. In the highlands of Central America, beneath thick canopies, entire plazas rest beneath vines, their steps worn smooth by long-departed feet. In the deserts of northern Africa, the wind draws gentle lines over buried foundations. In the forests of Europe, strange hills rise and fall like forgotten breaths. We often imagine ancient people as strange and far away, but they were not. They were builders, dreamers, mothers, hunters, poets. They looked up at the same moon and wondered, as we do, what would be left of them. They did not know they would vanish. No one ever does. Some civilizations died in silence because they were never loud to begin with. They did not wage wars, carve monuments, or demand God's attention. They lived in balance, in rhythm with rain and harvest. And when that rhythm broke, by drought or flood or a slow unraveling, they faded, not fell. Even now, beneath modern cities, archaeologists find footprints that do not match the maps. Walls where there should be none. Chambers built by hands long erased from lineage. These discoveries are not always announced. Sometimes they are left untouched. Too deep, too tangled, too unknown. The earth is not eager to give up its secrets. It has carried them too long. There is beauty in this and also sadness, but not a tragic sadness. Rather the kind that settles on a quiet afternoon, the kind that hums in the background of an old song, a soft, aching peace. You may be wondering, why do they disappear? Sometimes the answer is simple: water, weather, war. But often the truth is murkier. There are civilizations that vanished without record. We know they existed only from broken pottery, scattered bones, or roads that go nowhere. They left behind no cries, no collapse, no final words. Only the stillness that comes after. And still, somehow, we hear them. Their cities are now forests. Their temples are now fields. Their names are now questions. But the stories they carried, somehow in dreams, in myth, in quiet wonder, those remain. And that is where we will stay for now. Not to solve or explain, not to catalog, but to walk beside them, slowly, gently, as if they were still there, just out of sight. In the darkness beneath stars, you'll find them, the ones who didn't scream, the ones who became part of the earth, the ones who went to sleep and have not yet woken. This is not the end of a story. It is the pause between chapters, the hush before the next breath. And in that hush, we begin. There are silences you can hear, not the hush of a quiet room, not the absence of traffic or voices or birdsong, but something older, something deeper. The silence of something that should be there, but isn't. Like walking into a house and knowing before you turn on the light that no one is home. Or running your fingers along an empty shelf and feeling the outline of a book long removed. That is the kind of silence ancient civilizations leave behind when they disappear without a trace. Somewhere there once stood a city with no name we can remember. A village of people who sang to the stars, who marked the days by the bloom of a certain flower or the rhythm of the river. They lived, they loved, and they are gone. Not erased by war, not toppled by flame, not buried by eruption or swallowed by sea. They simply stopped, and now even their ruins are missing. There are no roads, no walls, no stories carved in stone, no artifacts in museums, only faint traces. Pollen samples, oddly shaped mounds, the way a forest curves unnaturally around nothing at all. To vanish like this is to become something less than forgotten. It is to become unremembered. We often speak of lost civilizations as though they are waiting somewhere to be found. But not all are lost. Some were never noticed at all. Imagine a group of people, thousands strong, migrating from a river basin now dry, carrying language, rituals, 1,000 years of memory in their hands. They settle, they grow, they thrive. And then something shifts. A long drought, a broken alliance, a sacred animal that stops returning in the spring. And so they move again, or dwindle, or disappear. Not in panic, not in fire, but in stillness. They leave behind no monuments, no written words, no voice loud enough to echo, just the echo itself. The world forgets them, gently but thoroughly. They are not the civilizations that fill textbooks or stand beneath glass in softly lit museum halls. They are not taught, not shown, not named. But they are there. The soil knows them. The rivers remember. And sometimes a child will walk through a field where once a city stood and feel a chill they cannot explain. There are cultures for which not a single word survives. No names, no greetings, no prayers. Their entire vocabulary lost, not because it wasn't important, but because time is patient and language is fragile. The wind wears away more than stone. There are places where archaeologists have found hundreds of stone tools, all from a civilization we cannot name. We don't know what they called themselves. We don't know what they believed, who they loved, what made them laugh. We only know that they were, and now they are not. This is the sound of something missing. A hum that should be in the air but isn't. A drumbeat without rhythm, a voice without echo. Sometimes at night you may have felt this yourself. A sensation that something once shared this world with you and no longer does. A phantom presence. A warmth in the corner of your heart that fades the moment you try to look at it too closely. That is what it feels like to brush up against one of these vanished people. There are hills in the British Isles with perfectly rounded tops, smooth, unnatural green. But they are not hills. They are the remains of long rotted structures covered by centuries of growth. In the American Midwest, there are ancient mound cities that once held tens of thousands, more than London in its early days. Now only the mounds remain, no names, no histories. Who were they? And in the heart of Africa, beneath dense jungle, there are whispers of kingdoms once mapped but now denied. Cities whose trade routes vanished from the records. Who traded what? Who told the stories there? We may never know. It's easy to think of silence as empty, but this silence is full of voices you'll never hear, full of music you'll never know, full of stories, rich, beautiful, strange, that no one will ever tell again. And yet somehow you feel them. You know without knowing that they were here. Perhaps that's the deepest part of the mystery, that these cultures, though unrecorded, still speak in their absence. Their missingness becomes presence, like a space left on a shelf for something sacred. We don't need to understand a story to be moved by it. And we don't need to hear a voice to know it once rang through the trees. In a way, these vanished civilizations still exist, in the shape of the land, in the memories carried unknowingly by modern people, in dreams passed down like seeds across generations. Their art may be gone, their words may be gone, but their wonder is not. And as you listen, as you lie still in the dark with your eyes closed, they draw closer, not loudly, but with the soft grace of a breeze through leaves, a hush where history once sang, a lullaby made only of memory. This is the sound of something missing, and sometimes it is the most beautiful sound of all. Time does not always erase with fire. More often it erases like water, slowly, quietly, shaping the stone by brushing against it day after day. Not all civilizations vanish with spectacle. Some simply loosen their grip, a little more each season until nothing is left but air. It begins with something so small that no one notices. The harvest is a little thinner than last year. The stream dries earlier in the summer. A particular bird doesn't return in spring. No one panics. Why would they? It's happened before, but then it happens again and again. And the patterns start to break. Maybe the elders begin to argue more often. Maybe the temple goes uncleaned for a few weeks. Maybe the songs the children used to sing fall silent as the days grow harder. And then one morning a family leaves. They don't make an announcement. They pack what they can carry and they go. The people remaining say, they'll be back. But they never are. That's how it starts. Not with war or plague or divine judgment, but with a series of unnoticed goodbyes. There are cities we know once thrived. We find their bones scattered beneath layers of soil, homes arranged with care, tools still sharp, pottery painted with delicate precision. There is no sign of destruction, no fire marks, no skeletons in defensive positions, no sign they were conquered. They were simply emptied. And we ask why. What made them walk away? But time gives no answers, only clues. A shift in trade routes, a subtle climate drift, a generation born without faith in the old stories. And just like that, the slow unraveling begins. No calamity, just entropy. A roof collapses and no one rebuilds it. The path to the well grows wild. The stones are pulled from the wall to build something somewhere else. Eventually, the village that once echoed with voices becomes nothing more than a memory, one not even carried by the wind. Sometimes history doesn't forget you. It just doesn't notice you're gone. There are civilizations that became soil without anyone writing their final chapter. No epitaph, no elegy, no record of the last child born or the last fire lit. Imagine pages in a book. Now imagine a page missing. Not torn out, just gone as if it never existed. You read on, but something feels incomplete. You don't know what, but you feel the gap, the way one might feel a missing tooth with the tip of the tongue. That's what it means to vanish in the cracks of time. Somewhere in the forests of Eastern Europe, there are mounds shaped in deliberate patterns. Settlements once filled with life. They left no writing, no weapons, no graves. They're not part of any nation's history. They were never named in the chronicles of kings. And yet they were real. For hundreds of years, people walked those earthen streets. They traded, laughed, cooked over fires. They dreamed, they worried, they buried their dead with care. And then, one generation decided, perhaps without knowing, to be the last. No story begins knowing where it will end. Some civilizations simply step outside the arc of time. They drift into the space between was and might have been. And what is lost in that drift? Maybe it's not just tools and temples. Maybe it's ways of thinking we can't retrieve. Maybe there were languages with words for feelings we no longer recognize. Maybe there were beliefs that could have changed the course of the world, if only they had lasted. We search through fragments, a shard of a pot, a burnt seed, the outline of a building seen from the air. We try to rebuild them, not physically but in our minds. We try to imagine who they were, what they feared, what they loved. But it's like tracing shadows on water. What we have are outlines, silhouettes, the suggestion of lives, and still we feel close to them. Because deep down, we understand what it means to fade, to grow quiet, to be remembered only partially. These people are not gone in the way we think of death. They are gone in the way seasons go. Present, and then not. Leaving behind a feeling, a softness, a space. And sometimes time folds. A road crew uncovers a layer of ancient brick. A hiker stumbles upon a field where once a village stood. And we are reminded, the past is not beneath us but all around. To disappear slowly is not failure. It is simply another kind of ending. Not every story needs a climax. Not every culture needs a collapse. Some slip away in peace. The rain falls year after year. The roots grow deeper. The stones sink into the earth. And the world forgets, not out of cruelty, but because forgetting is part of moving forward. But we, in our sleep, in our wandering dreams, remember. We feel them. The ones who vanished not with a scream but a sigh. They are not buried. They are not erased. They are simply in the cracks. And perhaps that's where the truest parts of history live. Not in headlines or monuments, but in those quiet spaces in between. The spaces that still hold breath, the ones that wait. Tonight, let them wait with you. Rest in the folds of their memory. Drift in the hush between centuries. Sleep not above them but beside them, as if their fire was still burning just a little ways away. In the west of India, where the land meets the Arabian Sea, there are waves that remember. They move with an old rhythm, not chaotic, not wild, but slow and steady, as if they are humming a forgotten song. And beneath them, if the legends are to be believed, sleeps a city of golden domes and wide avenues, a city lit by stars and devotion, a city built not just on stone but on divinity. They called it Dwarka, Krishna's city, a jewel along the coast, vibrant with music, prayer, and life. But then one day the sea reached out its arms, and Dwarka was gone. That's how the stories go. For thousands of years, the tale of Dwarka was passed from voice to voice, whispered in temples, told by fishermen, woven into the sacred epics of the Mahabharata. Krishna, they say, founded it himself, a divine city pulled from the earth with a will beyond mortal hands. It had palaces made of silver and walls carved with emeralds. It was said to float upon the sea, not with boats but with blessings. A city of abundance, ruled by wisdom, protected by power. And then, a curse, a war, a silence, and the ocean, patient and deep, swallowed it whole. For centuries, that's all it was, a story, a dream told by the waves, a myth dressed in moonlight. But myths have their own kind of truth, and sometimes, if you listen closely enough, the sea gives something back. In 2001, off the coast of modern-day Dwarka in Gujarat, a team of marine archaeologists scanning the ocean floor picked up something unexpected. Patterns, man-made structures, long, straight lines, geometries that didn't belong to coral or chance. At first, the world barely noticed. Too many sunken cities had been promised, and so few found. But the divers knew what they saw. Streets, foundations, Evidence of walls, docks, even what could have once been steps leading into the deep. What they found lay submerged in murky water beneath layers of silt, too deep to easily reach, too old to cleanly date. But it was there, and suddenly the line between legend and history began to waver. Not blur, not disappear, but tremble. Could Dwarka have been real? In Sanskrit, the name Dwarka means door or gateway. A fitting title, perhaps, not just for a city, but for a passage between what was and what might have been. What if this mythic kingdom wasn't imagined, just misremembered? The sea, after all, is not only a destroyer. It is a keeper, a gentle curator of the past. Where fire consumes, the ocean preserves. Where air allows rot, water allows rest. It softens the outlines, blurs the edges, and keeps the heart of a place intact. The underwater ruins near modern Dwarka don't rise like Atlantis. No perfect columns or marble halls. They are quiet, subtle, the kind of structures that feel more like memory than architecture. Large rectangular blocks, once part of platforms or buildings. Stone anchors so old their ropes have become dust. Traces of walls that seem to reach toward a shore that no longer exists. Some scientists say the remains are at least 9,000 years old, a date that would shift the entire timeline of Indian civilization. Others are more cautious, placing it at 3,000 years or fewer. And so the debate continues. Is this Dwarka of legend, or another city entirely? One forgotten by humans, remembered only by the tide? Maybe both are true. Maybe what we call myth is just the shadow of a history too big to fit into memory. Maybe stories are how we keep truth breathing, long after the facts have drowned. The Mahabharata tells us that Dwarka was doomed from the start, built on divine ground, but meant to last only as long as Krishna walked the earth. When he departed, the balance unraveled. The sea came not in wrath, but in inevitability, not to punish, but to reclaim. There's something gentle about that version of the story. No cataclysm, no screaming collapse. Just water rising as it always does. Slow, steady, eternal. And the people. Some say they left. Some say they vanished. Some say their descendants walk among us still, carrying salt in their blood and stars in their bones. What's real? What's story? The beauty of Dwarka is that it doesn't insist. It doesn't need to be proven. It doesn't beg for belief. It drifts, like the silt around its buried stones. It sings, like wind in an empty temple. It invites you to wonder, and then lets you go. At night, the waves along Gujarat's shore roll in with a sound like breath. The tide flows out with a rhythm that feels ancient, practiced, kind. You can almost hear footsteps beneath it. Laughter, music, a conch shell's low, solemn call. And maybe if you stand quietly enough, if you listen with something other than ears, you'll feel the city again. Not with your mind, but with your skin. A flicker in the water, a shimmer beneath your thoughts. The shape of something once known, now only half remembered. Dwarka is not a place you find. It is a place you drift toward slowly in dreams. It does not rise from the sea. It waits beneath it. And tonight, as you rest, the ocean carries you over its memory. You do not need to dive. You only need to close your eyes. The city will come. Not in brightness, but in feeling. Not in answers, but in echoes. You are floating now, just above a world that once pulsed with devotion and color. A world that loved, lost, and then let go. Let it carry you deeper. Let the silence of the sea become your own. Let the myths whisper gently through your thoughts, not as fantasy, but as possibility. And sleep, not as forgetting, but as remembering something just beyond the reach of words. In the quiet waters off the coast of southern Greece, the sea covers something ancient. Not legend, not myth, but real streets, real rooms, once filled with life. The name is Pavlopetri, but no one knows what the people who lived there called it. No scroll bears its history, no epic poem sings its name. And yet, beneath the blue-green shallows it waits, patient, whole, and impossibly still. Discovered in 1967, Pavlopetri rests just a few meters underwater. It's not hidden in the darkness of the deep ocean, nor buried under layers of sediment. It lies openly, quietly, like a forgotten drawing beneath a pane of glass. From above you can see the shapes, grids of roads, outlines of homes, rooms with walls, corridors that lead from one threshold to the next. The sea in its endless motion has preserved it, not by shielding it from time, but by slowing time down. Where buildings on land might crumble under wind and rain, here in these shallow tides they remain. Not perfectly, but clearly. You can still trace the outline of a family home. You can still see where people may have gathered to trade, to cook, to sleep. Some structures even include what appear to be double-story homes, rare for something over 5,000 years old. Some rooms face courtyards. Some are positioned around roads that curve and bend with intentional design. This wasn't a scattered settlement. It was a city. And then, one day, it was gone. The most likely cause was an earthquake, or a series of them. The coastline shifted, the sea moved inland, and the city surrendered. But not in panic, not in flames. There are no signs of sudden flight, no remnants of destruction, just a city resting now in shallow water. The sea wrapped itself around Pavlopetri like a gentle tide pulling a blanket over something it wanted to keep. And perhaps it did. There's something strangely intimate about Pavlopetri. Unlike other underwater ruins which lie fragmented or scattered, this place feels intact. Not grand, not monumental, but familiar, human, domestic. You can almost imagine stepping barefoot into one of those stone-walled rooms, brushing a hand along the surface, feeling the cool stone beneath your fingertips. You can almost hear laughter echoing faintly in the corners, or the clink of vessels at an open-air market nearby. Pavlopetri is not mythic like Atlantis. It does not dazzle with gold or grandeur. It whispers, it drifts. Its mystery is not that it vanished, but that it remained. A city beneath the sea, not buried, not broken, but floating just beneath the surface of history. The ocean here is clear. The light reaches easily, and when the sun is high, the shadows of those ancient walls fall on the seafloor like ink drawings. Divers glide through narrow passageways, swim above once lively neighborhoods, peer through windows into lives that ended 5,000 years ago. And the sea does not resist them. It welcomes them with slow currents and silence. There are no guards here, no gates, only the vast invisible embrace of time. Archaeologists have studied Pavlopetri with reverence. Using sonar and underwater mapping, they've traced its full layout. Not just homes, but roads, courtyards, what may have been temples or communal spaces. It's the oldest known planned submerged city in the world. But beyond the data, beyond the coordinates and measurements, there is a feeling. A feeling that someone once stood where the diver now floats. That hands once smoothed the same stone. That a child once peeked around a corner where now only fish swim. This is what the sea gives us, not facts but feelings, not names but impressions, not monuments but memories. It gives us a city we cannot hear, but can almost remember. You might expect the sea to silence all things, but Pavlopetri proves otherwise. Here the ocean has become the city's voice, a shroud, yes, but also a storyteller. Its waves whisper the outline of streets. Its tides tell the shape of forgotten days. At night, if you were to float above it with the stars reflected in the water, you might feel them. Not ghosts, not spirits, but echoes, gentle ones. The kind that don't call your name but rest just behind your thoughts. The kind you feel more than hear. And if you listen long enough, in the hush between waves, you might sense what it was like long ago when those streets were dry, when the city was not beneath the sea but part of the world above. You might not know their language, you might never know their gods or stories, but you will know something deeper, that they were here, that they built, that they lived. And now, they dream beneath the tide. So tonight, let yourself drift with them. Let the weight of time fall away. Let the sea carry you gently like a cradle. The city is not calling you. It is simply waiting. It always has been. And now, as sleep begins to rise around you, you are closer to it than ever before. Closer to the rooms without voices, closer to the streets without footsteps, closer to a silence that remembers everything. Pavlo Petri is not lost. It is only sleeping, just beneath the surface. Just like you, there is a kind of silence only water can create. Not the silence of emptiness, but of fullness, a weight pressing gently down, erasing without violence. The sea does not rage when it takes. It does not announce its intentions. It simply rises, bit by bit, tide by tide, year after year, until one day a place that was always there isn't. It doesn't matter how many people lived there, how long the hearths burned or the temples stood. The water doesn't care for stories or boundaries. It flows. And in that flow, things slip away. First fields, then walls, then language. This is the story of places you've never heard of. Not because they weren't important, but because their names were among the first things lost. They did not burn. They did not fall. They drowned. And when something drowns slowly, it doesn't scream. It just sinks, out of sound, out of sight, out of history. Take Doggerland. It once stretched between Britain and mainland Europe, a vast land of rivers, hills, forests, and people. Not mythical, not speculative, real. Fishermen still pull up bones from its meadows, now resting beneath the North Sea. Mammoth tusks, ancient tools, fragments of hearthstone. Once this place teemed with life. Tribes moved between lands. Families hunted by rivers long, erased. Children were born, played, grew, and died in villages now buried under miles of salt water. They didn't know the world was changing, not at first. The ocean rose slowly, a little more each year. Flooded streams, muddied fields, salt in the soil where crops once grew. They likely moved higher without panic, just a necessary adaptation. But over time, the higher ground ran out, and the ocean closed in like a hand. We don't know what they called their homeland. We don't know their words for sky or mother or home, because all of that, their entire language, sank with them. And yet even now, if you stand on the cliffs of eastern England and look out at the sea, you're staring across what used to be a forest, a village, a world, all gone. The Caribbean holds other ghosts, islands that were once larger, coastlines that swallowed settlements, communities erased not by waves crashing in a day, but by the patient creeping of time. Underwater off the coast of Cuba lie massive stone formations, rectangular blocks, geometric alignments, paths that seem too ordered for nature alone. Some believe it is the remnants of a lost city, others that it is geology playing tricks, but either way, the ocean has taken the power of the question, and the sea does not answer, it just sways. In the Bahamas, there are whispers of Lucayan villages that once dotted every major island, now gone, some by storm, some by sea, some by the slow fade of culture itself. Their words, we know almost none. Their stories, scattered in fragments and shadows. Some places disappear physically, others culturally. Language dies when no one speaks it, and when the land itself goes under, those last whispers don't just fade, they vanish. Across the Pacific, entire atolls have been lost, not to catastrophe, but to tides inching forward over generations. And the people moved, took new names, adopted new myths, and the old ones, they dissolved into salt and spray. You might think names are permanent, that what we call something gives it weight, identity, protection. But names too are fragile, especially when no one remains to say them aloud. There are maps with blank spaces, edges frayed by time, oceans covering dotted lines once drawn in certainty. But the land is no longer there. Only water, only memory. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not that the buildings are gone, not that the people are lost, but that the words we use to mark them have been swallowed too. We don't just lose structures, we lose the sound of a place, the cadence of its language, the rhythm of its storytelling. What do we do when even the names are gone? How do we remember what we can no longer call? It is said that the sea forgets nothing, but perhaps it forgets in a different way. Not through absence, but through immersion. It keeps everything but hidden, just beneath the surface. So, the names are still there somewhere. On currents, in coral, in the mouths of whales, in the hollow hum of waves against cliff, in the breath of sea foam rising and falling in endless prayer. We do not hear them now, but they are not gone. Maybe the sea is still speaking them, just in a language too old to remember, too fluid to write. And maybe that's okay, because there's a certain kind of peace in not knowing, in letting the sea hold its secrets, in allowing silence to be enough. Tonight, as you lie still, you're closer to them than you know. The sunken places, the places with no name, the drowned worlds that dream in blue. You are floating above languages that no longer echo, above stories told in voices now carried by tide. You are drifting with memories that have no shape, no timestamp, only presence. So let them keep you. Let the sea cradle you, like it cradled those last fires on those last nights on those vanishing shores. Let go of the maps, let go of the names, and sleep in the water's hush, where nothing is lost, only hidden, and everything waits softly beneath the waves. The jungle does not rush. It grows in silence, in patience, in shade. And when it comes for a city, it doesn't arrive with noise or thunder. It arrives like moss, like vines curling around forgotten corners, like a root pushing through stone without hurry or doubt. In time, it takes everything. There are ruins in Central and South America where entire cities once stood, massive, teeming metropolises with stone avenues, temples, courts, altars. Places that once rang with human voices that pulsed with trade and dance and firelight. Now the only sounds are wind and birdsong and the slow, creaking breath of the forest. No bells, no names, just green. Trees grow through collapsed archways. Their roots pry open what once was sacred. Monkeys swing through spaces once reserved for kings, and every year the vines weave tighter as if they're stitching the earth closed over an old scar. But the jungle is not cruel. It does not destroy with anger. It simply forgets differently than we do. In the Petén Basin of Guatemala, deep within the trees, rest the remains of Tikal, once among the largest cities of the Maya world. Tens of thousands lived there, walked its causeways, climbed its towering pyramids to greet the sun. Now, from the air you can see only endless green. The great temples rise like islands in a sea of leaves. The rest, the homes, the markets, the plazas, sleep under soil and vine. For centuries, no one knew it was there. No one imagined that beneath the humming canopy there was a world paused in mid-sentence. Even today, much of it remains unexcavated, intentionally so. Because once exposed, the jungle's protection vanishes, and time, faster than ever, begins to erode. The people who built Tikal are long gone, but the jungle, it remembers where their steps once fell, and it holds them. This pattern repeats across continents. In the rainforests of Cambodia, the mighty city of Angkor once rivaled any in Europe, with sophisticated water systems, towering monuments, and devotion carved into stone. Then it disappeared beneath roots and rain. For centuries it was whispered of, but few believed it. How could something so vast, so organized, so advanced be lost? But the jungle does not concern itself with logic. It concerns itself with growth. And stone, for all its strength, is no match for time wrapped in ivy. In the Amazon, satellite imaging has revealed the outlines of roads and settlements, visible only from above. Geometric earthworks, coils of forgotten agriculture, patterns of movement and meaning, all swallowed by canopy. For so long we assumed the jungle had always been empty. But that was never true. The jungle did not grow over emptiness. It grew over memory. And there is something beautiful about that, something comforting, that no matter how grand, how carefully planned, how full of life a city once was, the earth in time will hold it close, tuck it beneath its green layers and let it rest. Sometimes it feels like the jungle mourns, like it covers what we leave behind, not to erase it, but to soothe it, to give it sleep, to let it become part of something older. Civilizations crumble, empires fall, but leaves keep reaching for light, roots keep pushing downward, and the song of birds continues unconcerned with who ruled when. The jungle does not forget, it simply doesn't speak our language. But if you lie very still, if you close your eyes and let your breath match the rhythm of the trees, you might hear it. The sigh of stone beneath soil, the hum of stories carried in chlorophyll and sap, the heartbeat of cities that no longer remember they were cities at all. And maybe that's the truest kind of peace, to be folded back into the world that made you, to be covered not with tombs but with trees, to have your greatest monuments become nests and roots and shade. So many of us fear being forgotten, but the jungle teaches us something gentler, that forgetting is not always absence. Sometimes it's transformation. Tonight, as sleep pulls you inward, imagine walking through a place where every wall is covered in moss, where vines dangle like forgotten stories and the air is thick with the breath of centuries. You step softly. Each footfall rests where 1,000 others once fell. You do not disturb them, you join them, because here in this quiet green you are not a visitor. You are part of the memory. The jungle took back everything, not to erase, but to keep it safe. And now, as your breath slows and the edges of thought begin to blur, you rest beneath those trees too, held, hidden, remembered. Above the jungles, beyond the rivers where mist clings to stone and breath catches in thin air. There once lived a people of the clouds. They were called the Chachapoya, but that's not what they called themselves. Their name, meaning cloud people, came later, given by others. By those who arrived long after the last fire had burned down, long after the last prayer had been whispered into the damp Andean air. Their world was carved into ridges and cliffs, soaring above the green canopy where the sky brushed the mountaintops with low silver fog. Here, they built homes of stone, high on ledges, fortresses nested in the arms of the mountains. They lived not just above the jungle, they lived apart from it, as if they were keeping a secret. And now, centuries later, that secret remains. We know little about the Chachapoya. Their cities were small but sophisticated, circular stone dwellings, carefully aligned walls, burial towers tucked into vertical cliff faces, as if death was meant to stay above the earth, cradled by sky. One of their most haunting legacies is Kuelap, a massive fortress perched on a mountain spine in northern Peru. Its outer walls rise higher than medieval castles. Its entrance is narrow like the neck of a bottle, designed not just for defense but for control. Quilep was not merely a stronghold, it was a sanctuary, a city in the clouds. Inside, the remains of hundreds of structures, some homes, some ceremonial, stand in silent circles. Moss blankets the stones, the sky feels closer than the ground, and the air carries a kind of hush, a reverence for something unseen. The Chachapoya thrived in this high world for centuries, dwelling in spaces that feel more imagined than built. They painted their walls with patterns. They honored the dead with bundles of bone, wrapped and placed like offerings in cliffside alcoves. Their presence stretched across these ridges, weaving through valleys and rivers like threads in a tapestry. But it unraveled quietly. When the Incas came, they brought more than conquest. They brought assimilation, language, governance, ritual. The Chachapoya were absorbed, not erased in a single blow, but slowly, softly, until their temples stood quiet and their names fell out of daily use. Then came the Spanish, and what little remained of their culture slipped even further from memory. What we know now comes not from words, but from walls, from bones placed lovingly on narrow ledges, from stories passed down in fragments, echoes of a people who built their lives so high, it feels like they were trying to stay just out of reach of time itself. And in many ways, they succeeded. To walk through what remains of their world is to feel the thinness of the air in more ways than one. You feel lighter, detached, as if you've stepped into a dream made of stone and fog. The vegetation is different here, more restrained. The light breaks in soft angles, and always the horizon seems just a little too far to touch. In these cloud forests, you don't feel like you've entered a ruin. You feel like the people simply stepped out for a moment, as if they are still watching just beyond the mist, waiting. Their disappearance was not loud, no dramatic collapse, no final battle sung into the ages. Just a slow fading, a language no longer spoken, customs not passed down, cities unvisited, doors left open to the sky, and still, the mountains hold their shape. Still, the stones remember. When archaeologists explore these sites, they do so with a sense of reverence, not just for the engineering, but for the emotion. These cities were not accidental. They were built with care, with attention to place and spirit. And now, long after the last song was sung, the mountains still echo. Even now, locals will tell you that the spirits of the Chachapoya linger in the mists, that on cold mornings you can hear whispers weaving through the fog, that some peaks should not be climbed, not out of danger, but out of respect. Perhaps that's what the cloud people truly wanted, not permanence, but peace, not to be remembered loudly, but to be left alone, in the hush of high altitudes where breath is short, but wonder lasts forever. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine stepping through one of their stone doorways. The fog curls around your shoulders, the sky glows pale above your head, and all around you silence settles like a warm shawl. You are walking in a place that was never meant to be conquered, only visited, only felt. And as you lie still, your breath shallows to match the thin air. Your heartbeat slows to the rhythm of the hills, and you sleep like the Chachapoya in the arms of the clouds. There are places so dense, so vast, so breathing with life that they hide their past in plain sight. The Amazon is one of them. To look at it from above is to see endless green, a living ocean of trees stretching farther than the eye or camera can follow. Roots entwined with roots, rivers winding like veins through an unknowable body. It feels untouched, primordial, timeless. But that's not quite true. Beneath those leaves and vines lie the remains of something human. Roads, fields, platforms, and cities. Places once filled with people, now overgrown and forgotten. We used to think the Amazon was empty, too wild, too unforgiving for large societies to survive, a place for scattered tribes, not civilizations. But the forest was never empty. It was full of memory. We just weren't listening. And the forest, in its own quiet way, kept its secrets well. Until recently. Satellite imaging, LiDAR, has begun to peel back the canopy. With beams of light bouncing through leaves and measuring space, we've begun to see what the eye never could. Grids, geometries, earthworks, patterns too precise for nature alone. Whole networks of settlements connected by roads aligned to stars designed with intention. It turns out the Amazon was not a wilderness hiding from civilization. It was a civilization hiding within wilderness. And in this realization, something shifts. We begin to understand that the people who once lived here did not conquer the forest. They cooperated with it. They farmed in harmony using terra preta, a rich, dark soil they created, enhancing fertility without harming the land. They built fish weirs, dug canals, planted groves that still bear fruit today. They shaped the forest, and the forest shaped them. But then came disruption, disease, colonization, collapse, and the jungle, ever patient, reclaimed what it could. Walls were swallowed by vines, pathways blurred into the underbrush, temples crumbled quietly into the soft earth. And names, the names of cities, of rivers, of gods, were lost beneath leaves and silence. What's left are shadows, mounds, raised soil shaped like circles, like suns, like serpents. They appear briefly in the dry season, ghosts visible only when the trees thin and the light gets in. Some of these earthworks are massive, covering hundreds of acres. Others are smaller but no less precise. They were not random, they were not temporary, they were deliberate, planned, loved, and we don't know what to call them because we never knew them to begin with. These are the unmapped kingdoms, civilizations so deeply woven into the forest that they became part of its skin. And in a way, isn't that the most human thing of all? To leave behind not a scar, but a breath? The people of these cities did not disappear in fire. They didn't raise monuments to be seen from afar. They lived close to the earth. Their stories passed not in books, but in memory, in songs, in footsteps worn into the soft ground. But when the forests closed in again, those footsteps faded. And yet, the land remembers. The soil here is still dark with purpose. Trees bloom in symmetrical groves planted long before any of us were born. The rivers still follow the courses shaped by ancient hands. The forest did not erase them, it embraced them, held them, and waited. And now, as we begin to look differently, not just at the forest, but through it, we are seeing them for the first time. We don't know their names, we may never learn their languages, but we feel their presence, not just in the ground beneath our feet, but in the very air, in the way the jungle hums at dusk, in the rhythm of rain on canopy. Somewhere deep inside, we recognize them, because these were people who knew how to live with wonder, who built cities that vanished without force, not because they failed, but because the world changed around them. And now they live in absence, in mystery, in the soft hush of things not quite known but never fully gone. They ask nothing of us, only that we walk gently, only that we listen. You may never stand beneath their walls, they may never be excavated, never photographed, never explained, but they are there, still, and that's enough. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine standing at the edge of the forest, not a jungle of noise and danger, but a cathedral of green. You step forward, the ground rises and falls beneath moss. You place your hand on a tree that once grew near a kitchen, a temple, a marketplace. No signs, no plaques, just the quiet knowledge that you are not alone. They were here, and now, so are you. The forest breathes slowly, and you breathe with it. Not everything needs to be found. Not everything needs to be named. Some stories were written in roots. Some histories live in wind. And as you fall deeper into sleep, know this. There are cities beneath the trees, kingdoms without maps, lives without names, and they remember you, even if you're just now beginning to remember them. There is a kind of silence only the desert knows. It is not empty. It is not still. It moves, like breath over sand, like memory through stone. It sings in a language we've forgotten how to hear. In the southern reaches of the Arabian Peninsula, in a place once called the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, lies a legend that lived longer than the city it described. They called it Ubar, the city of pillars. A place said to have thrived where no place should, a hub of wealth, knowledge, and wonder built in the heart of the harshest desert on earth. According to myth, Ubar was magnificent. Its towers shone beneath the sun. Its streets were crowded with traders bearing myrrh, incense, and frankincense, treasures more valued than gold in the ancient world. It was called the Atlantis of the Sands, a city said to have defied the gods with its arrogance, and for that was swallowed whole. By the earth, by the sand, by time. For centuries, Ubar remained a tale, passed through campfires and scriptures mentioned in the Quran as Iram dat al-Imad. Iram, the city of lofty pillars whose people turned from the divine and vanished. Some believed it never existed, that it was metaphor, a warning. But stories are rarely born without reason, and sometimes what we call myth is simply history wrapped in the wind. In the 1990s, NASA satellite imagery revealed something strange beneath the dunes. Ancient caravan routes, invisible to the eye but clear from above, all converging at a single point. A place long marked on ancient maps. A place long missing from modern ones. When archaeologists excavated the site, deep beneath layers of collapsing sand, they found the remains of a fortress-like settlement. Stone walls, artifacts, collapsed sinkholes where water had once been drawn. And what may have once been tall towers, now broken, half buried in time. Was this Ubar, not the city of legend perhaps, but the seed of the story? The place that inspired 1,000 whispered tales. What fascinated most wasn't how the city thrived, but how it ended. One theory suggests it fell into itself. A massive limestone cavern beneath the city gave way, collapsing part of the settlement into the earth. The water source vanished, the people fled, and the sand swept in slowly, completely quietly. A city that once stood tall, now hidden beneath the very trade routes it once commanded. There is no definitive proof that this was the fabled Ubar, but something was there. And something ended. The desert does not offer certainty. It offers suggestion. It moves with time, not against it. And in the shifting dunes, stories rise and fall like the wind-carved ridges themselves. You can walk the empty quarter for days and see nothing. No horizon, no shade. Just the sky above and the earth below, both unending. But in the stillness, you might begin to feel what the people of Ubar once felt. The thrill of defiance, of building something in a place that wants nothing to be built, of drawing water where there is none, of carving trade and faith and firelight into the very bones of the desert. And then, you understand why the legend matters, why it endured, not because of treasure, not because of pride, but because it speaks to something in us, a longing to endure even in the most forgotten corners of the world. Ubar was not simply lost. It was taken back, by sand, by silence, by time itself. It was never meant to be remembered clearly. It was meant to be felt, like a mirage that lingers just long enough to make you wonder if it was ever real. And in many ways, that's more powerful than proof, because the desert does not keep history the way other places do. There are no overgrown temples, no buried pottery. The sand moves. It buries, then unburies, then buries again. It whispers truths that change shape as they travel. One year, a dune may cover an entire wall. The next, it may reveal a doorway. And behind that doorway, nothing. Or everything. The mystery of Ubar lies not just in what it was, but in how completely it slipped away. Like a breath held too long. Like a name forgotten mid-sentence. Like a dream that fades before morning. And now, those who cross the Rub al-Khali, nomads, explorers, scholars, sometimes report strange sensations. The feeling of being watched, the sound of wind that carries more than wind, the certainty that something is near, just beyond the ridge, just beneath the sand. Some say it's imagination. Others say Ubar is not dead, only sleeping. That it drifts beneath the dunes, still echoing with footsteps, with markets, with voices that once called out to stars. Tonight, as your breath slows, as your thoughts begin to shift like dunes under moonlight, let the sands of Ubar carry you. You don't need to find it. You only need to feel it. The way heat shimmers in the distance. The way silence curves around a story. The way a city can disappear and still leave its pillars behind. Not in stone, but in memory. Sleep now, not in the shadow of Ubar, but in its echo. Let the desert wind guide you, soft, steady whispering of what once was, and what still might be, beneath the sand. In the Libyan desert, where the earth breathes heat and time moves like dust through fingers, there are walls that go nowhere. They rise from rock and sand without warning, just tall enough to catch the eye, too worn to tell their story. There is no sign beside them, no plaque, no legend carved in stone. Only the faint outline of something once deliberate, now dissolved into silence. They are called many things, remains, ruins, echoes, but most often they are called forgotten, because no one knows who built them or why. Some sit alone, half buried in red sand. Others stretch in long, broken lines across plains that hold no cities. They form patterns but offer no answers. Their stones, stacked by careful hands, remain upright against centuries of wind, as if waiting for someone to remember. But no name comes. The desert offers little, a few scattered tools, the curve of a shattered pot, bones dry as the air itself. Beyond that, nothing. These walls are ghosts, not in the supernatural sense, but in the way they remind you of presence, of something that once was so fully, so certainly, that its absence now feels like a weight. And yet, they do not beg to be understood. They do not demand attention. They remain, quiet, immovable, like punctuation marks in a sentence we've lost the words for. Libya's southern deserts have always been crossroads. Traders, nomads, invaders, all moved through these lands. But who stopped long enough to build, to stack stone upon stone, to mark the desert with geometry and intent? Some archaeologists believe the structures may be tied to the Garamantes, an ancient Saharan people whose ingenuity stunned the world. They built underground water systems, designed cities in the most unforgiving terrain, and then vanished into dust. But the timelines don't always match. The shapes don't always make sense. These walls are older, or younger, or something else entirely. No script, no clear function, only silence. And silence is hard to study. You can walk for days and find only one, a corner of an enclosure, a curve that suggests purpose. You step closer, run your hand along the stone, and feel nothing but heat. Smoothness worn by wind. Still, the sensation remains. Someone built this. Someone stood here, hands calloused, eyes focused, placing stone against stone for a reason we may never know. And perhaps that's the deepest part of the mystery. Not what the walls meant, but why they were forgotten. Civilizations rise and fall, but usually they leave something behind. A name, a myth, a song. Here, even those are gone. It's as if the desert took not only the people, but the memory of them. And yet the walls stay, not proud, not ruined, just there. In the early morning, as the sun rises and shadows stretch long across the sand, they look almost alive, like ribs of the earth exposed to breath and light. And at dusk, they melt back into the color of the land, blending until you wonder if you ever saw them at all. They are neither monument nor tomb. They are punctuation in a sentence that no longer has a speaker. But maybe not all history needs a name. Maybe some stories were meant only to be felt, not told. The ghost walls of Libya do not offer resolution. They do not complete our narrative of the ancient world. They widen it. They remind us that for every city remembered, a dozen more lie waiting in silence. And that silence is not empty. It is sacred. So tonight, as you let yourself drift, imagine walking beside one of these walls. Your footsteps fall soft on red sand. The heat of the day lingers in the stone. Above, the stars begin to shimmer. And for a moment, you feel something familiar. Not recognition, but kinship. You do not need to know their name. You only need to know they were here. And now, so are you. There are roads in the Sahara that lead to nothing. They stretch across windswept plains, their edges faint but unmistakable, etched into a desert that should not hold memories so well. They pass by dunes and dry riverbeds beneath skies so wide they swallow sound. No caravans travel them now. No footprints press into the sand. But once, long ago, these roads pulsed with life. At their end was a kingdom most have never heard of, the Garamantes, a desert people whose brilliance was buried not by war but by time and shifting sand. For centuries they were spoken of only in fragments, brief mentions in Roman writings dismissed as mere nomads, uncivilized and marginal. But they were not. The Garamantes built cities in the most arid corners of what is now Libya. They cultivated gardens in places that hadn't seen rain in years. And beneath the very ground their home stood on, they carved a miracle. A labyrinth of underground channels, the Fogaras, ingenious tunnels that tapped into ancient aquifers, pulling water from the earth's hidden reserves, using nothing more than gravity and wisdom. They tunneled for miles, creating a web of life beneath the lifeless crust. The desert bloomed, fields ripened, palms swayed. From the air, their cities seemed modest. Stone enclosures, flat-roofed dwellings, dust-softened ruins. But beneath, a civilization that understood not only how to survive the desert, but how to shape it. They weren't just farmers, they were traders. Middlemen in a web that stretched from sub-Saharan Africa to the Roman Empire. Salt, gold, ivory, and then perhaps most importantly, people. The Garamantes participated in the slave trade, a complexity often softened by distance and time, but one that shadows even the brightest legacies. Still, what they built in that empty place was extraordinary. A network of towns and roads, a system of water storage and agriculture, a culture of artisans and scribes, all flourishing in a landscape that gives little and takes much. And then, over time, they vanished, not with a collapse, not with fire or conquest, but like so many others, slowly. Their aquifers dried, the Fogaras choked with sand and silence fell into disuse. Trade routes shifted, the desert expanded, and the people moved on. Some say they joined other tribes, some say they faded into myth. What remains now are broken walls, scattered pottery, and those empty roads, The Romans once called them a problem, a thorn in their empire's side. They built forts to keep the Garamantes out, not realizing the desert had already done so much to keep them in. And now, those Roman ruins stand beside Garamantian ones, both crumbling together, both whispering the same quiet truth. Even great things end. But the Garamantes were more than a footnote. They were proof that human brilliance is not confined to riverbanks and coastlines. It blooms wherever we dare to listen to the land, even in the most impossible places. You can still walk their roads. Though the sand has softened their edges, they are there, leading from ruin to ruin, from one ghost to another. And as you walk, you notice something strange. You begin to hear, not sound, but rhythm. The rhythm of a people who learned to measure time by sun and shadow, who dug toward water when others searched the sky for rain. You feel their presence, not as specters, but as echoes, not as noise, but as memory. Archaeologists uncover more each year, but what they find isn't always what we expect. They find homes with painted walls, glass beads from distant lands, delicate writing tools, graves arranged with care. They find a culture, not just a survival. And that is what the desert guarded, not just stone, but identity. Still, the desert does not guard forever. With each gust of wind, each wave of heat, it reclaims a little more. And so, the Garamantes continue to disappear, not in tragedy, but in quiet. Even now, few know their name. Their cities are not tourist sites. Their inventions are not widely studied. Their roads are not marked. But that does not make them lesser. If anything, it makes them more haunting. A civilization that thrived without asking to be remembered. And perhaps that's what draws us to them. The mystery not just of what they built, but of how gently it slipped away. No fanfare, no conquest, just silence. A silence that still drifts through their ruined streets, that clings to their broken wells, that whispers from the mouths of dry tunnels leading nowhere now. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine walking one of those roads. The heat of the day has lifted. The sky is cooling to indigo. And ahead of you, just at the horizon, a low wall glows in starlight, the edge of a city that no longer waits for visitors. You walk quietly. The sand parts beneath your feet. You pass what remains of a doorway, a stone basin, a carved mark in a wall. All left behind, not with grief, but with grace. And you realize something. The Garamantes were never truly lost. They are here, in the shape of the land, in the bones of the desert, in the rhythm of water remembered beneath the soil. They walked these roads first, and now you walk with them. Not to find anything, but simply to be, to feel what they felt, to fade with them softly, beautifully into sleep. The cold has a way of holding on. It grips with gentler hands than fire or flood, but it never lets go. Where ice settles, time stretches. Things don't vanish, they freeze, waiting. In the far reaches of the North Atlantic, where the sea grows dark and the wind tastes of salt and stone, the Norse once made their home. Not in myth, but in Greenland, a land that promised pasture, possibility, and peace. They came around the year 985, led by Eric the Red, banished from Iceland, driven by ambition and exile. What they found was a land not green, but wild. Rocky coasts, short summers, winters that arrived like silence and stayed too long. Still, they endured. For generations, they carved farms from permafrost, raised sheep and cattle, built churches of stone. They lived in turf-walled homes, faces red with wind, hands rough from snow and soil. They held mass. They traded ivory, hunted seal, chased the sun. And then, they disappeared. 2 full settlements, dozens of farms, thousands of people gone, no graves, no final records, no sign of massacre or war, just absence. What they left behind was quiet, a scattering of tools, empty churches with missing roofs. And in the sagging doorframes of their homes, wind still passes through like breath. It's one of history's great unsolved departures. How could a community anchored for nearly 500 years simply fade? Some say climate, that the medieval warm period cooled and Greenland's short summers grew shorter. Crops failed, livestock died, and the sea ice grew thick and impassable. Others speak of trade, that Europe's markets shifted. That what Greenland offered, walrus ivory wool, was no longer enough, and without contact the colony withered. Some even suggest conflict, that the Norse clashed with the Inuit, new arrivals with knowledge of the ice and the patience to outlast it. But there are no signs of battle, no burned buildings, no broken bones. It seems more likely that they dwindled. A family leaves one winter seeking better land to the south. A ship fails to return. A generation grows smaller, then stops, and the cold remains. There is something deeply human about the story of Greenland's Norse, not because of their triumph, but because of their stillness. They were not conquerors, they were settlers. They worked the land, prayed in stone chapels, and buried their dead beneath white earth. They lived without greatness, but with grace. We know their names. We have their letters, records of weddings and trades, petitions sent across the sea. They wrote of debts owed, cows lost, children born. And then, the writing stops. No last farewell, no monument, just silence. You can still visit their ruins. Valsey Church is the best preserved, a simple rectangle of stone tucked between hills that now hold only sheep. The walls stand gray and smooth, carved by wind and memory. Inside there is no roof, only sky. The last written record from Greenland's Norse comes from Valsey, a wedding in the year 1408. After that, nothing. It's as if the story stopped mid-sentence, and yet the land remembers. The valleys still hold the outlines of their farms. The fjords still reflect the shadows of their boats. And in winter, when the snow falls without sound, the world feels just as they left it. Their homes, built of turf and stone, now sag into the hills. Windows like hollow eyes, doorways that open into frost. No heat, no light, only stillness. But it is a stillness you can sit with, one that doesn't press, one that lets you breathe slower, think softer. There are theories, of course, books and studies, arguments across oceans, but none can say for sure what happened to them. And maybe that's the point. Maybe not all endings are meant to be solved. Maybe some are meant to be held, like a snowflake in your palm, melting before you fully understand its shape. The Norse of Greenland are not ghosts. They are memories caught in frost, drifting between chapters of history, waiting not to be known, but remembered. And so, as night deepens and your eyes begin to close, picture this. A small stone house, its door slightly ajar, a flicker of firelight inside, long extinguished. The air is cold but not unkind. Outside, the wind moves across the fjord, carrying the scent of ice and pine. Inside, nothing stirs. And yet, you feel welcome. Because this was a home once. Because someone lived here. Because the silence is not empty. It is full. Full of lullabies sung in a tongue now gone. Full of footsteps pressed into snow so many winters ago. Let yourself rest there. Let the cold hold you gently. Let the mystery be enough. The Norse did not vanish. They became part of the land they loved, part of the cold, part of the quiet. And now, as sleep gathers like snow, you lie beside them, not in fear, not in grief, but in peace. Far above where most people live, beyond the reach of trees, beyond the hum of roads and wires, there is a world where silence reigns. The Arctic, where snow stretches like parchment and wind writes in whispers. A place where time doesn't pass, it lingers. And in this world of frost and sky, people once lived. Not just survived, lived, fully, carefully, softly. They are called many things now, cultures named by the tools they left behind. Pre-Dorset, Dorset, Thule. Terms shaped by archaeologists, by absence, because their own names, their own words have long since slipped beneath the ice. But they were real. They were watchers. Of the moon, of the tides, of the seal's breath at the edge of a hole in the ice. They watched the land like a living thing, reading cracks, snowfall, the faintest stir of a caribou's ear miles away. And they left behind no cities, no towering stone, no books or battlefields. What they left was quieter and stranger, and more haunting than anything carved in granite. Stone tools shaped so precisely they could cut through hide in one motion. Nets woven from sinew, stronger than they appeared. Tunnels of ice, homes dug into snow, half shelter, half prayer. And dolls, tiny carved with faces worn smooth by time or touch. Effigies of comfort, or ceremony, or memory. We cannot ask them. There is no record, no language to translate, only lines of speculation drawn across white. And yet, they speak, not with voice, but with pattern. On Baffin Island, in the cold months when the sea is still and the air holds its breath, archaeologists have found fragments, traces of tents, bones arranged with purpose, tools wrapped and buried beside the dead. In Greenland, beneath layers of drift and frost, they've found structures aligned with the stars, as if even here, under endless night, the heavens still mattered. And in the northernmost stretches of Siberia, they've uncovered artifacts so old, so untouched, they seem like offerings left by the ice itself. These were not primitive people. They were specialists, survivalists, engineers of warmth and movement and meaning. They lived in balance with what we would call unbearable. And when we wonder how, we must remember. They did not conquer the cold. They listened to it. They knew when the sea ice would crack. They knew which animals moved in which months. They followed cycles like stories handed down in gesture and breath and gaze. No alphabet, no scroll, but memory, living and shaped. And then, as all things do, they changed. Some merged with later groups, others faded. Some were absorbed into what would become Inuit or Yupik or Aleut lineages. Some perhaps were simply left behind by time. What they didn't leave was explanation. Their disappearance wasn't marked, no final symbol etched into stone, no collective burial to close the chapter, only less, fewer tools, fewer bones, until there was nothing more to find. And still, the North holds them. You feel it in the wind that sings across tundra. You see it in the bones still buried in frost. You hear it in the soft crunch of snow underfoot. Echoes of lives walked carefully. Sometimes the world forgets its loudest voices, but it remembers those who moved with reverence. We call them cultures, but that word is too small. They were families, children with red cheeks, mothers mending boots by lamplight, fathers fishing through darkness, laughter muffled by fur hoods. Songs hummed beneath auroras. They were watchers of the world, of each other, of the sky. And now, they watch us through the things they left behind. They do not accuse. They do not call. They remain, present, gentle, unresolved. So tonight, as you lie in the hush of your own quiet space, let them drift closer. Not to teach, not to explain, but to share their silence. Imagine standing on a snow-blown ridge. The horizon is endless, the air crisp and clean, and beneath your boots the ground holds stories too quiet to shout. You close your eyes and feel a presence beside you, not seen, not heard, but known. A people who lived with stillness, who breathed with the cold, who disappeared not because they failed, but because the world turned and they let go. Sleep now, with them. Let the frost wrap around you like a blanket. Let the stars above become their lullaby. And let the silence they carried carry you too. Beneath the northern sky where clouds drift like forgotten dreams, there are things sleeping under the ice. Not monsters, not legends, but truths. The kind too quiet to survive in loud histories. The kind hidden in frozen soil, sealed for centuries, waiting. Here in the high Arctic, where breath turns to mist before it's spoken, the ground is not just ground. It is memory, preserved in permafrost, a time capsule of human effort and quiet endings. For thousands of years, people walked this land, not as visitors, but as inhabitants. They knew how to listen to the wind, how to read the language of snow. They lived in step with the sun's slow return and shaped their lives around cold certainty. But when we speak of ancient civilizations, we rarely speak of them. Because what they left behind wasn't built to last. Not in stone, but in snow and silence, and yet the Arctic remembers. In recent decades, as the Earth warms, the ice has begun to release what it once held. From the tundra emerge tools of bone, fragments of woven fur, the curled spine of a child wrapped in seal skin. Not relics of conquest or glory, but echoes of daily life. Cooking, carving, loving. Buried beneath ice and sky, these fragments do not scream. They whisper. There's no single name for the people found in this frost. Some belong to the Dorset, others to ancient ancestors of Inuit, or to even older groups we have no words for. They didn't leave behind temples. They left footprints in snow and traces of flame in soot-darkened caves. They shaped blades sharp enough to cut seal hide from stone so brittle it would snap in careless hands. They survived not in spite of the cold, but because of how well they knew it. And now the land is shifting. The ice that protected their memory for millennia is melting, and with it pieces of their story emerge. But slowly, unevenly, as if even now the past resists being uncovered too quickly. Sometimes it's a single mitten, perfectly preserved. Sometimes a piece of driftwood carved with lines that no one living can read. And sometimes a burial, a body curled on its side surrounded by small objects. Carved ivory, a worn amulet, a seal tooth polished smooth. No text, no language we can translate, just weight and care, because even in death, they buried their loved ones with intention. Not to be remembered, but to be left in peace. What do we call a civilization that never asked to be known, that never fought to be remembered? Maybe we don't need to call it anything. Maybe we just need to listen. There's a stillness in these findings, not absence, but restraint. It feels as if they lived close to the veil that separates time. 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the drifting snow of elsewhere. And as we excavate more of their world, we find not answers, but atmosphere. Places where tents once stood now bloom with wildflowers in summer, fragile roots threading through the very places they once cooked, slept, and sang. In the dark months, the northern lights dance overhead, colors bending in silence like stories too old to retell. Maybe those lights are memories. Maybe they are the only monuments these people needed. There is something sacred in how little they asked of the land. They did not remake it. They moved with it. No walls, no borders, just rhythm. And then, at some point, they were gone. Not vanished, but folded into the snow. Whether from changing climate, migratory shift, or a dozen causes we may never fully know, they slipped out of the present and into the frozen patience of history. But not entirely, because here you are, reading, listening, wondering, and that alone is enough to thaw the past, if only slightly. So tonight, as you lie beneath your own sky, Let this story drift across you like snowfall. Picture a tent made of stitched seal skin, its edges fluttering in the wind. Inside, a small lamp glows. A woman hums to a baby wrapped in fur. A man sharpens a blade with quiet hands. And outside, a world so wide, so still that every breath feels eternal. They are not gone, not really. They live in the ice, in the sky, in the slow reveal of a mitten found in thawed soil. You may never know their names, but they have given you something better. Stillness, humility, a memory that asks for nothing except to be held gently. Close your eyes now. Let the frost cradle you. Let the stars speak in a tongue made of light. And let the cold wrap you not in fear but in comfort. For what is buried beneath ice and sky is not lost. It is only sleeping. And so are you. There are eruptions, and then there are endings. Some volcanoes roar, some explode with fury. But Thera, what we now call Santorini, did something different. It ended a world with silence, with a sky turned to smoke, a sea pulled back in breath, and a single moment preserved in ash like a stopped clock. Long before whitewashed villas leaned into the Aegean cliffs, Thera was whole. A rounded island cradling the sea, green, alive, home. On its gentle shores, a city thrived, Akrotiri, a port of color and calm. Frescoed walls painted with saffron fields, monkeys leaping from branch to branch, sailboats bobbing on painted waves. They had art, architecture, engineered plumbing centuries ahead of their time. And then, in a summer that no one marked, the ground began to shift. First in whispers, tremors like footsteps in the belly of the earth, then in pulses, a rhythm too deep to be human. They must have known. The frescoes stop abruptly. The objects left behind are too few. No bodies have ever been found. This was not Pompeii. This was foresight, or grace. Perhaps they fled. But what remained, what the volcano entombed, was the breath between awareness and aftermath. A city on the edge of transformation. A moment frozen. When Thera erupted, it was one of the largest explosions in human memory. The island didn't just break. It collapsed into itself, sending ash into the sky, tsunamis across the Aegean, and echoes into the myths of every shore it touched. Some say it inspired the legend of Atlantis, a civilization swallowed in a single breath, too perfect to endure. But Akrotiri is no myth. Its streets still lie beneath layers of volcanic dust, intact. Its staircases still spiral upward toward vanished ceilings. Its painted swallows still dart across clay walls in colors untouched by time. What was lost that day was not just a place, but a rhythm. A way of life measured by tide and trade, by art and sunlight, swept away and sealed. The ash did not burn, it preserved. Each layer tells a story of descent. First the tremors, then the fall, then silence. Archaeologists walk through those rooms now like guests arriving late to a gathering long since gone. Everything is still there, waiting. Jars rest where they were last touched. Tools lie beside doors that never opened again. A chair leans slightly forward as if someone just stood to answer a call from outside. It is haunting, not because it's broken, but because it isn't. Akrotiri did not die screaming. It was paused. And in that pause, we see ourselves, caught between knowing and not, between movement and stillness. Thera's eruption reshaped the region. It darkened skies and distant lands. It shifted economies, wrote endings into cultures we thought separate. Some even link its aftermath to the weakening of the Minoans far across the sea. But the science does not carry the weight of the silence. What lingers is the dream of a moment kept. A blue-painted room, a tiled floor, a bowl turned upside down in the dust. You can close your eyes and feel the warmth still rising from the ground. You can hear the hush before the wave, not the scream, not the rush, but the moment the air stood still. That's where Akrotiri lives now, in that breath, not gone, not alive, but waiting. It is a reminder that destruction can be elegant, that erasure doesn't always mean violence. Sometimes it means protection, a keeping, a secret offered slowly, layer by layer. Even now, we have not uncovered it all. Some streets remain buried. Some stories still sleep beneath the ash. Perhaps they prefer it that way, because Thera did not leave behind ruin. It left behind quiet. And tonight, as your body grows heavy with sleep, you may find yourself walking through Akrotiri, not as a visitor, but as someone returning to a place they once knew. You move past empty doorways, past painted dolphins frozen mid-leap. The walls hum softly, not with sound, but with memory. And in that quiet city beneath the ash, you are not alone. You are walking with those who once stirred stew over clay hearths, who once laughed near open windows, who once paused just before everything changed. Let yourself rest there, in the stillness, in the dust that remembers. Because sometimes the loudest echoes come from places that never made a sound. Before Greece, before Rome, before the names that shaped history books, there was Crete. And on that sun-drenched island rising from olive groves and stony cliffs was a civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that it seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as silently. We call them the Minoans, though we don't know what they called themselves. Their language, Linear A, has yet to be deciphered, a script that speaks in symbols but says nothing we can fully understand. They built palaces that sprawled like cities, multi-story buildings with plumbing, ventilation, storage systems that defy our expectations of the ancient world. They painted walls with vivid color, blue dolphins leaping between waves, graceful figures with hair like flowing ink, bulls mid-charge beneath flying acrobats. There were no great defensive walls, no signs of war, only art, trade, and temples. A society that seemed to value movement, ritual, and beauty. And then, it stopped. Not in fire, not in conquest, but something quieter. There are theories, as there always are when history leaves a gap. Some point to earthquakes. Crete sits on a restless part of the earth, and the stone palaces show signs of repair after tremors. Others blame the sea, tsunamis triggered by the volcanic eruption of Thera, just 70 miles north. It's possible, probable even, but what's strange is not that disaster came. It's how the Minoans responded. They rebuilt. At first, they continued their rituals, repainted walls, refilled storerooms. But something had shifted. In the later layers of Knossos, the great palace at the island's heart, the colors fade. The art loses some of its joy. Symbols of power grow darker, more rigid. The open courtyards begin to close in. And then the Mycenaeans arrived, mainlanders from what would become Greece. They brought their own language, their own gods, their own rhythm. The Minoan world was not destroyed in a single moment. It unraveled, gently, invisibly. It faded like a dream when you try to remember it too quickly. There were no mass graves, no conquered capital, just a soft folding inward until the heart stopped beating. And maybe that's what haunts us most. Not the loss, but the silence. Because the Minoans were not primitive. They were not half-formed. They were thriving. And yet their story was never passed down. Not by them. Their writing stopped. Their voices went still. And the only echoes we have are those painted on plaster, carved in rings, shaped in clay jars large enough to hold oil or memory. Their cities remain somewhat. You can walk through them today, through corridors lined with columns red and black, through throne rooms flanked by griffins, through lustral basins where sacred water once pooled in ritual quiet. But there are no answers there. Only questions that bloom in the silence. Why did they build so beautifully only to vanish so gently? Who were they offering their prayers to? And why do their gods remain unnamed? Did they see the end coming? Or did it surprise them the way twilight surprises a warm afternoon? No one knows. But in that not knowing there is something peaceful. Because not all silence is absence. Some silence is reverence. Some silence is protection. Maybe they didn't leave stories behind because they gave them to the land instead, to the sea, to the breeze that rushes through palace ruins at dusk, carrying the scent of thyme and salt. Maybe their story isn't meant to be told, only felt. And tonight, as your breath slows and the room softens around you, you might find yourself walking barefoot through the ruins of Knossos. The stones are warm beneath your feet. The sun is low. Somewhere nearby, a lyre begins to play, a song that's more vibration than melody. You follow painted corridors, past flickering torches, past open archways that look out over the Aegean. And though no one speaks, you feel that you are not alone. This place is remembered, not loudly, but completely. The Minoans do not ask to be rediscovered. They are not waiting to be rescued by our understanding. They are still here, in the balance, in the light, in the silence they wrote themselves into. Sleep now, and let their story unfold not in words, but in warmth and water and wind. The earth does not warn us in words. It shifts beneath us, rumbles softly, then speaks in ash. Across continents and centuries, long before satellites or sirens, the world cracked open its mouth and swallowed lives in silence. Not just once, not only in Thera, but again and again, always differently, always devastatingly. These were not loud extinctions, not conquests, not drawn-out collapses. These were whispers followed by fire, and then stillness. The earth breathes through volcanoes, its deepest pulse, its fiercest sigh, and when that breath turns violent, entire histories vanish before a single word of farewell. Let us begin in Rabaul. On the island of New Britain in Papua New Guinea, the ground is hot beneath the feet. The caldera sits like a sleeping mouth, rimmed by quiet cones. But in 535 CE, something ancient stirred. It erupted so violently it may have changed the climate of the entire planet. Ash drifted into the upper atmosphere, darkening skies across Asia, lowering temperatures, triggering famines. In China, records speak of yellow snow in summer. In the Byzantine Empire, the sun dimmed for over a year. Crops failed, empires trembled. But the people of Rabaul, we do not know their names. Only that they were there, and then they were not. The ash buried not only their homes, but their memory. A people erased in a single breath of fire, leaving behind no myth, no monument. Thousands of miles away, another eruption, another silence. Mount Mazama, in what is now Oregon. 7,700 years ago, its summit collapsed in a fury of molten light. What remained became Crater Lake, serene, beautiful, hiding a violent past beneath its mirror-like surface. The Klamath people tell stories of that day, a battle between gods, the sky shattering, the mountain falling inward. Their oral history remembers what geology took millennia to explain. But we do not know the names of those who watched the sky fall and did not survive to speak of it. Only the lake remembers. Still, deep, unfathomably blue. In Central America, long before the Spanish arrived, the Ilopango volcano in El Salvador erupted around 535 CE, the same year as Rabaul, the same cold summer across the globe. Ilopango's explosion was apocalyptic. Lava scorched over 300 square kilometers. Ash covered the land in a choking veil. Entire Maya communities disappeared, cities abandoned, fields left to rot. The jungle grew back over bones, over altars, over names. and the earth said nothing. Farther south, Cerro Blanco in Argentina erupted nearly 2,000 years ago. One of the largest known eruptions in South America, but barely recorded. The people nearby had no written language, only stories told in the smoke of firelight. We do not know if they saw it coming, if they prayed or fled or simply watched the sky collapse. Their silence is total, but their absence lingers. Even in Japan in the 10th century, Mount Tawada exploded with such violence that entire Ainu communities vanished from the archaeological record. The lake it left is quiet now, a peaceful wound. And in Africa, yes, even there, ancient eruptions reshaped the land and its memory. The Tanzanian volcano Ngorongoro once towered over the landscape. Now it is a crater teeming with wildlife, but it was once fire. And before that, it was home. And always, after the flame comes the ash, and after the ash comes the forgetting. What connects these distant eruptions is not just their violence, it's the stillness they leave behind. The ash that coats a city also muffles its voice, preserves it but erases its noise. You see, the earth doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it seals, covers, keeps. In Iceland, beneath Loki's 1783 eruption, entire villages vanished. Livestock died, ash poisoned rivers. But for the farmers who survived, what remained was the memory of a summer where the sun never fully rose. In Indonesia, Tambora's 1815 eruption was the largest in recorded history. It birthed a year without a summer. Skies turned gray across Europe. Snow fell in June. Poets like Mary Shelley wrote of monsters while famine spread like fog. But on Tambora's slopes, an entire language disappeared. An entire people, never fully studied, never truly understood, gone in the blink of a firestorm. And so it goes. Eruption after eruption, the earth sighs and something vanishes. Not always a city, sometimes a story, a ritual, a way of seeing the stars. We look for ruins in stone, but ash is harder to hold. It doesn't crumble, it drifts. Sometimes even memory becomes weightless, and yet there is beauty in what remains. In Japan, the soil around old volcanoes is lush. Fields thrive on ash-rich ground. Greenery springs from what once was flame. In the Andes, buried shrines have been found beneath layers of cooled lava, perfectly preserved. Offerings never meant to be seen again, now seen only by wind and archaeologists. In the Philippines, Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, a modern echo of ancient patterns. Whole villages evacuated, but afterward a lake formed in the crater. Silent, glass still. It draws visitors now, not for the violence that shaped it, but for the quiet that followed. That's the truth of it. The earth speaks in ash, but its final language is silence. And within that silence there is space, to wonder, to mourn, to dream. So many lives lost to fire, so many names unrecorded. But when you stand at the edge of a volcanic crater, you do not feel only destruction. You feel awe, weight, the sacred hush of something greater than ruin. Something remembered not in words, but in weather, in soil, in the soft, persistent drift of ashes on the wind. And tonight, as your eyes begin to close, let yourself drift with them. You are no longer here. You are standing on a high ridge overlooking a caldera that once held fury and now holds clouds. The ground is still warm beneath your feet. The breeze carries no scent of smoke, only the echo of something long ended. You breathe in slowly, and for a moment, you are part of that long silence, that endless hush, that final chapter written not in ink, but in flame. Sleep now, where the earth once burned, where the ash has settled, where nothing screams, but everything is still speaking. In the hot dust of the Indus Plain, where the river once wandered through swaying reeds and sun-bleached stone, there rose a city unlike any other, not crowned by conquest, not armored in iron, but arranged with grace, balanced, measured, silent. Its name, now whispered across time, is Mohenjo-Daro, the mound of the dead. But when it breathed, there was nothing dead about it. This was not a fortress, not a capital of blood or banners. It was something gentler, something rarer, a city of peace. Built over 4,000 years ago in the golden hum of the Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-Daro was a marvel of quiet logic. Its streets ran in straight, precise lines, not winding like accident but gridded like thought. Homes were made of baked brick, uniform, clean, each with its own courtyard, its own drainage system, its own breath. They built sewers, underground, planned, unmatched for their time. They understood water. They honored it. Not just with wells and baths, but with ritual. The Great Bath at the heart of the city wasn't just for cleansing, it was sacred. A place where water touched the skin and the soul. And what's most haunting is what they didn't build. No palaces, no monuments to kings, no sculptures of warriors or war. No weapons have been found in their ruins, not one. There were no empires etched into stone, no names carved into walls, only patterns, balance, order. And then, they were gone. Not all at once, not in fire, not in siege, but slowly. Brick by brick, the rhythm of the city fell out of step. Walls crumbled, drains clogged. The streets, once so straight, began to collect dust instead of footsteps. What happened? We still don't know. Some say the river shifted. The lifeblood of the city wandered away, leaving the people to chase its new course. Others speak of droughts, earthquakes, or disease. There are theories, fragments, but no answers. No epic collapse, no decisive ending. Just silence. The city was not conquered, it was left behind. And that is the mystery. Because civilizations usually go loudly, they fall in flames, in swords, in stories. But Mohenjo-Daro did not. It dissolved. And in that gentle vanishing lies something profound. Here was a people who lived in complexity without chaos, who governed without dominance, who vanished without vengeance. When we excavate their homes, we find uniformity, but not oppression. Standardized weights, carefully measured bricks, signs of trade reaching far and wide, from Mesopotamia to Central Asia. But no gold, thrones, no tyrant's tomb. It is the most democratic mystery history has ever buried. Even their script, delicate lines pressed into seals, remains unread. A language that held their truth now lies locked, its key lost to time. The people of Mohenjo-Daro left no explanation. And perhaps that was the point. Because in their city, everything spoke for itself. A drain that worked, a staircase that still stands, a basin cool to the touch even now. They didn't need to shout. They built with confidence, with trust and continuity. And yet, continuity failed them. Climate may have shifted, politics may have frayed, or perhaps something entirely invisible unwound their perfect design. But what's left still hums. When you walk among its ruins today, there's a strange quietness. Not empty, just still. The wind moves through the narrow lanes like it remembers the footsteps it used to follow. The sun falls across brick walls that haven't changed shape in 40 centuries. The Great Bath remains, dry but whole, as if waiting for someone to step in again. And through all of it, you feel watched, not by ghosts, but by balance itself. By a society that believed peace was not the absence of war, but the presence of care. Tonight, as your eyelids grow heavier, imagine yourself there. You move through narrow alleys, their edges softened by sand and time. You pass wells so deep you can still smell the echo of water. In the distance, the faint rhythm of pottery being shaped. A woman lifts a jug. A child laughs near the bath's edge. A breeze carries the scent of clay and cumin. There are no guards, no gates, no sirens, only people moving through the logic of a life carefully built. And though you know how it ends, or doesn't, you are not afraid. Because endings like this do not crush, they drift. And as you drift with them, let your own body soften. You are not in a city of ruins, you are in a city of remembering, of restraint, of quiet glory. Mohenjo-Daro didn't ask to be worshipped, it asked to be understood, not as myth, not as failure, but as possibility. The possibility that a civilization could rise without violence, could live in order without tyranny, could vanish without burning. That too is a kind of triumph. So sleep now, beneath its ancient sky. Let the rhythm of its vanished streets rock you gently. Let the silence speak more clearly than noise ever could. And if you dream of brick corridors and cool stone baths, you are not lost. You are walking where peace once lived. Some cities are made of stone, others are made of memory. And then there are those woven from both, half standing, half dreamed, glinting like sunlight on distant water. Tartessos was one of these, a city of gold, said to lie where the river meets the sea, where the Atlantic breathes onto Spain's southern shores and the land folds into marsh and salt, a place whispered by ancient seafarers, written of in broken lines by the Greeks, and chased by archaeologists who can never quite touch what they're chasing. No one agrees where Tartessos truly stood, only that it shimmered. It was said to be rich, not just in gold, but in grace. A trading empire where metal was shaped as easily as clay, where ships came and went bearing silver and tin, amber and ivory. Where songs were sung in a language no longer known, and kings ruled not by sword, but by the tide. The Greeks wrote of Tartessians as gentle, generous, deeply skilled in trade. They called the river by its name, the Tartessos, though today we know it as the Guadalquivir. Some believe the city stood near its mouth, where land sinks into water and marshes change shape with the seasons. Some say it lay farther inland, now buried beneath layers of silt and time, and others, more poetically, say it was never real at all. But myth and city are not so different. A city lives in the lines of maps, but it also lives in the yearning of those who seek it. Tartessos was known for its metalwork, its rivers laced with ore, gold drawn from the ground, melted in clay crucibles, poured into bracelets, amulets, goblets for rituals we no longer understand. It was a city of abundance, but without the usual scars of conquest. Its story does not echo with war drums. It drifts with wind and water. And then, as with all shimmerings, it vanished. Not in fire, not in flood, but perhaps in forgetting. Around 500 BCE, Tartessos disappears from records. The Greek writers stop mentioning it. No new coins are found, no tombs. Only silence. Why? Some speak of Carthage, rival traders who may have turned its wealth to ruin. Others say the river itself buried the city beneath silt and estuary, drowning it slowly in the very waters that once made it rich. But perhaps it was neither war nor water. Perhaps the city simply withdrew, from history, from map, from memory. Because some places do not want to be remembered the way others insist on it. They leave no inscriptions, no declarations, only a glint on the edge of a tale. Archaeologists have searched. They've dug through marshes near Huelva, found stone walls, ancient anchor weights, traces of metallurgic fires, but nothing conclusive. Nothing that says here, this was Tartessos. Only possibility. And that may be enough, because Tartessos never needed to be proven. It needed to be wondered about. That's what gives it life still, the question. The way it flickers at the edge of story, not asking to be understood, only to be followed. Tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine sailing toward its shores. You are on a narrow ship with linen sails, your hands skimming the warm water. The sky is bruised violet. The stars are just beginning to blink. And ahead, where the land curls like a question mark, you see lights, not bright, not blazing but golden, reflected in still water, whispering. You dock near reed beds. The air smells of salt and metal. The buildings are low and curved like wind-sculpted stone. You hear no shouting, only the murmur of trade, of stories traded alongside silver. A woman sells jars of ochre. A child holds a flute carved from bone. A man weaves copper threads through cloth, his fingers steady as the tide. And just as you step forward, just as you begin to understand, dear, it's gone. The light fades, the ship rocks, the shore dissolves into mist. That is Tartessos, not a city of roads, but of echoes, of glances, of gleaming hints. A city lined with gold, but remembered in quiet. Let it stay that way. Let it live not in ruins, but in rhythm. And as your breath grows slower, as the world around you dims, know that you've visited Tartessos, just long enough to believe in it, and just briefly enough to know you'll never find it again. Before the pyramids reached for the sky, before cities rose from rivers and bricks found shape in hands, before words had form or kings had names, someone built something. And then they vanished. No text tells us who they were, no myth carries their memory. Only the stones remain, heavy, deliberate, silent. We call them the oldest, though even that may not be true. They are simply the oldest we can still touch. Their work lies beneath fields, beneath jungles, beneath the layers of time so thick even time has forgotten them. But they were here. They looked up at the same moon, felt rain on their skin, dreamed perhaps of something bigger than shelter. And so they began to build. In what is now Turkey, buried under millennia of soil, rises Göbekli Tepe, a ring of carved stone so old it predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Massive T-shaped pillars carved with animals, abstract symbols, and hands. Hands, as if the stones themselves once stood like people. It was built around 9,500 BCE, when humans were supposed to be only hunters, only wanderers. But Göbekli Tepe speaks of gathering, of vision, of a spiritual reach long before villages were permanent. It challenges our story of ourselves, and when it was no longer needed, they buried it, deliberately, lovingly, as if protecting it from something they already sensed, the coming forgetting. We do not know what language they spoke. We do not know their names, but we know how carefully they carved, and that, in the absence of words, is something. Across the world, more oldness waits. In Peru, near Corral, the remains of a city lie wrapped in sand, pyramids of earth, plazas aligned with the stars, flutes made from pelican bones, no sign of war, no sign of wealth, just sound and sky and people living in rhythm with the wind. They built in harmony, then left no story of themselves behind. Just shape, just breathe. In the Sahara, before it was desert, there were lakes. And by those lakes, people carved massive stone structures, some in circles, some in lines, some in ways that still confound us. We find tools, graves, traces of their meals, but no names, no kings, no collapse, just presence, then absence. And in the Pacific, on islands barely touched by time, megalithic roads stretch under jungle. Walls, stairways, platforms, as if cities once danced there and then fell asleep. Who built them? Why did they stop? We may never know. Because deep time doesn't offer answers, it offers only quiet. And if you listen long enough, you begin to hear something not in what remains, but in what doesn't. No conquest, no writing, no declaration, only intention, only wonder. There is something humbling about standing before a structure older than cities, older than memory, older than myth. It makes the heart slow down, the breath soften. It reminds you how little we truly know. And that is not frightening. It's beautiful. Because to know everything would mean the story is ended. But the past, especially the deep past, still lives. In every stone unearthed, in every pattern half understood, in every alignment of monument and sun that makes you pause and wonder why someone 12,000 years ago cared enough to line it up just so. Tonight, as sleep draws near, let yourself drift back into deep time. You walk a ridge where the wind is warm, but the land is ancient. Beneath your feet are stones placed there before metal was shaped, before gods had names, before borders meant anything at all. You look down, and you see a path, not paved but clear, leading to a circle of pillars, weathered but waiting. You step inside. It's cool here, silent, but not empty. The air carries something, on not words, not voices, but intention, like a memory you don't remember having. And as you sit down in the center, the stars wheel overhead, just as they did for those who first stood here, those who built and did not boast, who created not for glory but for grace. You don't need to know their names to feel their presence. You don't need their story to carry their silence. Let it hold you. Let it rock you. You are not alone in time. You are part of its gentle, endless breath. The oldest unknowns are not lost. They are simply quiet. And tonight, so are you. Beneath the soles of your feet, history hums. You may not hear it, you may not feel it, but every modern city, every paved road, every bright cafe or crowded apartment block, they all sit atop something older, something deeper, something forgotten. We build on bones, on brick, on buried memory. The ground is not silent, it holds layers. Walk the streets of Rome and you are walking above older streets and entire worlds sunken beneath cobblestone and neon. Beneath churches lie temples, beneath fountains lie forums, beneath cathedrals lie whispers. The city rises like a palimpsest, a manuscript written over again and again, the old ink still visible beneath the new. In Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia's shadow stretches across a land layered with the weight of empires. Dig just a little, and the past bleeds through. An underground basilica, a sunken cistern lit by soft lights and the glint of Medusa's gaze. Walk those echoing chambers and you feel it, the weight of time pressing inward, not just backward. Even London, so seemingly modern, sits upon a grave of ages. When the underground drills its paths, it strikes Roman tiles, Viking nails, Saxon coins. Beneath bustling stations, amphitheaters sleep. Beneath the noise of today, there is always the quiet of what was. And then there is Athens, where the subway reveals pottery thousands of years old, lifted gently from the dust beneath shopping districts. Tourists sip coffee above graveyards. Shoppers walk past mosaics older than scripture. The present floats lightly, unaware of the gravity beneath. We like to think history is behind us, but often it is below us. Not gone, just buried. Sometimes cities fall and others are built directly atop them. Sometimes centuries pass and the old foundations become invisible, absorbed into the roots of the new. But those ancient stones don't forget. They wait. In Mexico City, the ruins of the Aztec Templo Mayor sit pressed against the Metropolitan Cathedral, a church built from the very stone that once housed the gods of Tenochtitlan. One empire swallowing another, leaving both visible if you know how to look. In some corners, the old gods still seem to breathe through the cracks. And farther east, in the deserts of the Middle East, entire tells, artificial hills, rise from the land, each a buried city. One built upon another, built upon another. 13 layers deep, 20 sometimes. Civilizations not erased, but compressed. What we often forget is that the earth is patient. It accepts what we leave behind. Dust becomes soil. Roofs collapse, then sprout grass. Walls turn to rubble, and rubble turns to landscape. And on that landscape, we build again, unaware that we are walking on memories. In Naples, the city above is vibrant, fast, loud, scooters racing through narrow streets, balconies blooming with laundry and laughter. But below, in volcanic tuff, lies a mirrored world, an entire ghost city carved underground, aqueducts, catacombs, tunnels, and forgotten chambers. During the wars, people fled down into those passages for safety. Now, tourists wander them like echoes. The farther we dig, the farther we remember. But memory in these places is physical. It has weight. You can touch it. Step into a basement and find a Roman bath. Renovate a home and discover ancient pottery embedded in the walls. This is how cities remember. Not through signs or statues, but through the ground itself. And it's not only the grand cities that hold these layers. Even humble villages can sit upon the hushed remains of something greater. A town in India may sleep atop the ruins of a forgotten Vedic kingdom. A quiet meadow in Cambodia may have once heard the chants of Angkorian kings. Sometimes we sense it without knowing. A strange hill in a field, a road that rises slightly for no clear reason. A change in the way the wind moves through an alley. The land holds stories, even when it no longer tells them aloud. Some places remain unexcavated, protected by accident or reluctance. Others are lost forever, their ruins crushed beneath foundations that cannot be lifted. We build and forget. Build and forget. But the forgetting does not mean erasure. The past waits beneath our shoes, humming low like a song only the ground remembers how to sing. And if you're quiet enough, if the world around you softens, you might begin to hear it. Not in words, not in facts, but in feeling. A resonance, as if you are not walking alone. You step into a cafe and feel the floor tilt slightly. You pass an archway that once led to a different kind of home. You look up at modern windows framed in stone far older than the city permits. And you understand. This is not just your time. This is every time, layered and sleeping beneath the surface. Tonight, as your body begins to drift, picture yourself walking those layered streets. You are in a city, not ancient, not modern, but both. You move slowly through a quiet square where old stone meets new glass. You descend stairs into a library, and beneath that a cellar, and beneath that, something older still. You kneel, brushing dust from a carved tile. It is smooth, worn by centuries of feet. Footsteps once hurried, once purposeful, now forgotten. You rest your hand on it. It is warm. And in that warmth, a flicker, not a memory exactly, a presence. This city never ended, it just shifted, layer by layer, like breath, like sleep. You close your eyes and the earth holds you gently, the same way it holds those who came before. Nothing is ever truly lost. It is only waiting beneath us. Some endings take centuries, but others arrive all at once. Swift, brutal, unannounced. Like thunder cracking through a clear sky. Like the world forgetting how to hold itself together. These are the moments when the earth speaks without warning. Not through smoke or flood, but through movement. Violent, immediate, final. An earthquake doesn't ask permission. It doesn't hint or promise. It arrives with the language of collapse. One breath, everything is standing, columns, temples, homes. And the next, it isn't. Across history, whole civilizations have vanished in the time it takes to blink. We remember the names, sometimes, but not the moment it all broke. Somewhere in the Aegean Sea, on the island of Crete, the palaces of the Minoans once stood proud, their walls painted with grace, their columns red and tapering toward heaven. Then the earth shifted beneath them. Some believe it was a series of tremors, waves of cracking hitting the island like the heartbeat of some buried god. Others say it was one great quake, followed by a wall of water rising from the sea like a curse, a tsunami born from Thera's fire. Minoan cities were crushed not by armies but by stone and salt. In an instant, the ritual baths overflowed, storage jars shattered, walls bent sideways, ceilings fell in great slabs. People ran, or didn't. We don't know how many died, but we know what vanished: order, beauty, rhythm. And after the shaking stopped, the silence remained. Thousands of miles away in the highlands of South America, the Moche people carved temples from adobe. They built great pyramids, stepped, painted, filled with offering and purpose. Their gods lived in the soil. Their kings wore the sun on their chests, but the land betrayed them. At some point in the 6th century CE, the earth convulsed beneath them. The temples cracked, walls of ritual art crumbled. The old gods fell with the bricks that once bore their names. Archaeologists later found signs, not just of tremors, but of a city abandoned in haste. Shrines half cleared, bones lying where they fell, paintings unfinished caught mid-stroke. A quake does not give time to complete anything. It ends things mid-breath. It interrupts. In Central America, the city of Quirigua, once a jewel of Maya architecture, may have met a similar fate. Its stelae still stand, but the city behind them whispers of sudden stillness. Stone cannot run, but people can, and they did. The timeline ends like a snapped thread. Then there is Port Royal, Jamaica. Not an ancient kingdom, but a thriving port city in the 1600s called the wickedest city on earth. A place of pirates, merchants, excess. On June 7, 1692, the earth beneath it liquefied. Buildings slid into the harbor, streets vanished into water. In less than 2 minutes, a city was swallowed by the sea. Not by storm, but by tremor, by sand turning to liquid underfoot. People described being sucked under. Whole blocks tilted sideways like ships on a dying sea. Today, divers swim where taverns once stood. The sunken remains lie quietly, glass bottles still intact on wooden tables as if waiting for their owners to return. But the shaking never gave them the chance. We think of cities as permanent, stone as final. But the earth reminds us, even stone can fall like ash. In Knidos, an ancient Greek city built on a fragile coast, an earthquake split its marble streets. Its temples fell into ruin not by time, but in one single evening. In Syria, entire Roman cities crumbled in the AD 365 Crete earthquake, one of the strongest in recorded history. Tsunamis raced toward the African coast. Harbors vanished beneath the sea. And farther east, in what is now Pakistan, ruins found in the region of Mehrgarh show signs of sudden abandonment. Walls cracked in patterns only shifting tectonics can leave behind. Floor tiles broken not by time, but by movement from beneath. And yet in these places life was happening. Children were playing, food was cooking, trade was being discussed. Then the sky changed. Because the sky does change when the earth does. It tilts. It rushes past your ears. There is no language for that kind of panic, only aftermath. We find collapsed staircases, tools left in mid-use, graves that never closed. Sometimes we don't even find bodies. Only the rooms they once stood in, now shaped like broken lungs. And the strangest thing about earthquakes is how quickly everything falls still again. One moment, noise, crashing screams. The next, silence. Like the world has paused itself. Not in peace, but in shock. And that's how many of these civilizations ended, not in fire, not in rebellion. But in a moment, the earth chose not to hold them anymore. And then, the rebuilding, if it came at all, was different, scarred, uncertain. Because after the ground moves, trust is harder to rebuild than stone. Even today, there are places we call ruins not because of time, but because of tectonics. They were not meant to end. They simply did. Tonight, as you lay still, imagine the sound of quiet stone beneath your pillow. Not cracking, not groaning, just resting. You are walking through an old street, half buried, half open to the stars. You see columns cracked down the middle, but still standing. A bird circles overhead. There is no wind. The air holds the memory of motion, a pressure like something once screamed here. But now, it is calm. Now, it is sleeping. You walk slowly, stepping over the lines of fallen homes, not afraid, not sad, just aware. Because everything ends, and sometimes it ends like this. In the hush after the fall, when even the earth seems to breathe in and hold it. This is not tragedy, this is history, and the earth has always kept its own clock. Sleep now. Let the ground beneath you stay still. Let the tremors pass. Let the silence hold you. Not everything that collapses is lost. Sometimes it is simply returned to the earth, from which we all came. Sometimes the earth doesn't wait. It opens, without sound, without thunder, without the mercy of warning. A road splits, a garden sways, and then suddenly, there is nothing. No house, no tree, no field, just a mouth in the earth. Open, hungry. This is not mythology, not metaphor. It is what happens when the ground below, quiet for centuries, forgets how to hold itself together. Sinkholes, landslides, moments when the land seems to yawn and whole lives slip into shadow. There are stories of this from everywhere, from villages whispered about in regret to cities that never fully made it into maps. In central Guatemala in 2010, a gaping hole appeared in the heart of the city. Circular, perfect, 40 stories deep. It swallowed a 3-story building as if it were nothing but paper. People stepped out that morning expecting sunlight. Some found sky, others found nothing at all. But this wasn't new. The earth has been doing this long before cameras, long before names. In ancient China, whole settlements vanished during rainy seasons. The ground, saturated by weeks of water, slid away from itself, carrying houses and livestock down into the valley as if erasing a drawing with one long stroke. The same occurred in the Apennine Mountains of Italy, villages slowly eaten from below. Centuries of homes balanced on limestone suddenly losing the strength to stay upright. You see, the earth is layered, and some of those layers dissolve. Underneath our homes, our roads, there can be caverns, voids, spaces that once held water but now hold only silence. And when the weight above becomes too much, they collapse. Just like that. A cough in the soil, a settling, then a fall. There are ancient records from Mesopotamia that speak of lands devoured in the night. No wind, no fire, just fields that were there and then were not. Archaeologists find the evidence buried deep. Hints of a vanished wall here, a collapsed layer there, with no signs of war, no traces of flame, just sudden absence. Sometimes it comes slowly. The edge of a mountain gives way and a landslide pours through like water made of earth. Trees fold, rocks tumble with a sound older than thunder. And the ground that once held life becomes a wave of stone. In 1949, in the remote village of Kait, in Tajikistan, an earthquake loosened the mountainside. An entire glacier of earth roared down. Villages were swallowed whole, not buried beneath a layer of ash or ice, but sealed under thousands of tons of rock. More than 20,000 lives were erased in one movement. And today, where they once lived, there is only silence and stone. The village is gone. Even the shape of the valley is different. Time moved forward, but the land stayed behind, holding everything it had taken. Sometimes the earth's hunger is quieter. In parts of Central America, people still tell stories of La Tierra Tragada, the swallowed land. farms that folded in, cows that disappeared, even children if the stories are true. They mark those places with caution now. Fences not to protect, but to remember. There are names on maps that no longer match what's there. Ghost names, coordinates without content. In Belize, remnants of Maya villages lie buried under collapsed limestone. The cenotes, sacred sinkholes filled with water, were not just spiritual sites. Some were the result of collapse, of Earth giving in. But to the Maya, they became gateways, not just to water, but to the underworld. Because when the land opens, it reveals something more than geology. It reveals the unknown. We pave over caverns, build homes on soil we trust, and yet sometimes that trust is broken. And not by malice, not by violence, but by silence. The silence of stone that forgets to stay strong. The silence of a root-rotted hollow. The silence of air trapped for 1,000 years, finally breathing out. In parts of Russia's permafrost, entire patches of tundra have begun to sink. Not from collapse, but from thaw. Beneath the ice for tens of thousands of years, gases slept. Now they wake. Craters form. Massive, gaping wounds in the land. Some as wide as football fields. Deep, black, echoing. There is no bottom you can see. Only cold breath rising up. These are not ancient ruins, they are beginnings. New marks in the old earth. But they are just as haunting. Because the lesson remains the same. What is solid may not always stay so. What is held may one day be released. And sometimes we never even knew what was there until it falls. You can't mourn a village you never heard of. You can't grieve a house that disappeared before it could be mapped. But the earth remembers. It holds everything it has taken. And once in a while a fragment surfaces. A broken tile in the woods. A wall where no house should be. A story told in a family with no ending. And you begin to wonder, what else lies just beneath? What else waited a little too long to let go? Tonight, as your body sinks into stillness, imagine the land beneath you. Solid, yes, but not frozen, not lifeless. Beneath the bedrock, beneath the soil, are chambers that once echoed. Passages that folded, openings that took what they were never meant to. You are safe, but you are not far from history. None of us are. Sleep now on the surface of the world, knowing that beneath you are layers of stone, of silence, of stories still being told by the land that once opened and swallowed them whole. Atlantis never needed to exist to feel real. We have chased it for centuries, not because it was found, but because it was lost. Because we need it to be. Not just a sunken city, but a symbol of perfection once held and then drowned. Of a civilization that had everything and somehow let it slip beneath the waves. Atlantis was first written down by Plato. 2 dialogues, 2 brief passages, no maps, no coordinates, just an idea. A memory passed from Egyptian priests to Greek minds, filtered through story and shaped by philosophy. A utopia, a warning, a dream. And yet we treat it as fact. We dig for it, dive for it, argue over it. Why? Because Atlantis isn't about what was. It's about what we think could have been. A city of harmony, balance, prosperity, where knowledge bloomed and society worked, where people lived in rhythm, not chaos, and where suddenly it all fell apart. Plato tells us Atlantis was powerful, advanced, a marvel, but its people became proud. The gods, displeased, sent the sea to swallow their arrogance. Whether meant as allegory or memory, the story stuck. And as centuries passed, Atlantis grew. It grew in detail, in geography, in allure. New maps claimed it lay in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, Antarctica, even under the sands of the Sahara. Each generation moved it, like a mirage, forever one step ahead of our understanding. But none of this was about geography. It was about longing. Atlantis became a mirror. In times of war, we imagined it as peaceful. In moments of collapse, we imagined it stable. In darkness, we cast it in golden light. A city made not of stone, but of need. And that is its true power. Not its ruins, but its reflection. Because if there once was a civilization better than ours, smarter, kinder, fairer, then there's hope. Maybe we can return to it. Maybe we were better once and we can be again. Atlantis holds that yearning, but it also holds our fear. The fear that even the best can fall. That no amount of progress protects us from hubris, from nature, from time. Atlantis warns as much as it comforts. It says, what is beautiful may not last. What is balanced may tip. What is remembered may be wrong. Over time, other shadows joined Atlantis. Echoes, imitations, dreams disguised as cities. There was Wise, the fabled city off the coast of Brittany, said to have been swallowed by the sea for its decadence. There was Cantre'r Gwaelod, the Welsh legend of a fertile lowland kingdom lost to the tides after a gatekeeper fell asleep. And there was Kitezh, the Russian city that sank into a lake to escape Mongol invaders, vanishing beneath the water, visible only to the pure of heart. These are not archaeological sites, they are stories. But stories too are ruins, scattered across language, shaped by wind, shifting with each telling. Each lost city becomes what we need it to be. Sometimes it is a warning, live better or vanish. Sometimes it is comfort, greatness has come before and will come again. And sometimes it is simply escape, a place untouched by the chaos of now. Atlantis, in all its forms, is what we look for when we are uncertain. It is the lost map we draw when ours feels incomplete. It is myth as memory, memory as mirror. And even though we haven't found it, not really, not clearly, perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Because the moment we find Atlantis, it becomes something else. It becomes a place with boundaries, artifacts, tour guides. It becomes fact. And fact has no room for wonder. Wonder lives in possibility, in half-remembered stories, in vague coordinates and shimmering horizons. To find Atlantis would be to end its usefulness, to lose it again in certainty. So perhaps the myth persists not because it's true, but because we need it not to be. Tonight, as your breath slows, imagine yourself walking toward that horizon. The sea is calm, the sky is endless, and far out, just beneath the water's surface, something glints. You take a step forward, then another. Not toward answers, but toward imagination. Toward that soft place between what we know and what we hope might be true. And there it is. Not Atlantis, but something like it. A feeling, a rhythm, a light you can't quite touch. Let it stay there. Not as discovery, but as dream. Let it be the city you never quite reach. The one that only appears when your eyes begin to close. Because Atlantis was never meant to be found. It was meant to be followed. And in the quiet that follows as the world around you fades, you understand. Some mysteries are not puzzles to be solved. They are lullabies to be sung. Atlantis is one of them. A myth not of loss, but of longing. And in that longing, we sleep. Not all lost civilizations are gone. Some are simply misunderstood, misnamed, misplaced, folded into the pages of history under someone else's story. We often imagine the ancient world in clean divisions, this city, that empire, this language, that god. But time does not write in neat lines. It scribbles, it overlaps, it erodes the labels. And what survives isn't always the truth, but what was convenient to remember. There are places scattered across the earth whose ruins have been named and claimed by the wrong hands. Places where the stones whisper in one tongue, but the textbooks echo another. Cultures buried not just by dirt, but by assumption. Take, for instance, the Indus Valley. For decades, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were viewed through colonial lenses. Neat grids and brickwork were seen as extensions of Mesopotamian or Persian influence. The cities were too advanced, too organized. Surely they must have been taught, shaped by neighbors. But they weren't. They were original, local. They stood on their own logic. And for too long that was overlooked. Because sometimes it's easier to fit the unknown into a familiar story than to admit we never understood it. In Central America, many early explorers assumed the Maya ruins they encountered must have been built by lost white settlers, Vikings, or the fabled people of Atlantis. Surely indigenous people couldn't have carved such sophistication from jungle stone. That myth persisted for years, even as the glyphs began to speak again. Even as archaeologists slowly realized the cities had names, the kings had calendars, the stars were tracked with precision not by outsiders, but by the Maya themselves. To misplace a culture is to silence it, not by destroying its ruins, but by assigning them to the wrong hands. In West Africa, the great walls and sculptures of Nok and If were long dismissed by early scholars. Bronze figures with lifelike precision carved centuries ago, assumed to be imports or flukes. Some even suggested they were made by Greeks who wandered too far south. But they weren't. They were African, they were brilliant, and they were ignored. Even today, many people don't know those cities existed, not because they were lost, but because their stories were buried beneath layers of disbelief. Further east in Southeast Asia, the ruins of Nan Madol rise from the ocean like a stone dream. For years, its origins were misattributed. Some thought it was a monument left behind by drifting Polynesians. Others said it was haunted, the work of spirits, not people. But the builders had names, they had families, they had rituals that aligned the stones with the stars, and they were forgotten not by time, but by carelessness. To misplace a culture is not just a failure of archaeology. It is a failure of imagination, a failure to see possibility in unfamiliar shapes, a failure to accept that brilliance has always been global. The ancient world was not a ladder but a web, and every forgotten thread matters. Sometimes ruins are blended together, one atop the other, until the stories tangle. In Turkey, the site of Troy holds 9 cities stacked like pages in a burned book. Which one is Homer's? Which one burned? Which one lived quietly for centuries while the poets looked elsewhere? We cannot always say. In Peru, the Wari built vast cities long before the Inca. Their roads stretched like veins. Their architecture defined regions. But when the Inca rose, they absorbed the Wari into their story, not through conquest alone, but through forgetting. And so we credit the Inca for things older than their name. It happens again and again. One culture swells, another fades, and over time we remember only the louder voice. But memory is not about volume, it is about listening. Misidentified ruins often sit beneath our understanding like bones misnamed in an anatomy. We walk through temples and call them Roman, forgetting the Etruscans. We praise Greek columns while forgetting the Cycladic islands. We name things after conquerors and erase the conquered. The names become wrong, the maps simplify, the edges blur, and whole peoples disappear without vanishing, reduced not to ash but to footnotes. But they're still there, in the carvings that don't match the empire above, in the pottery too old for the label beside it, in the strange glyph that refuses to translate cleanly. They are the tension in the timeline, the voice behind the veil. Tonight, as you drift towards stillness, imagine walking through a ruin not marked by signs. You step across flagstones carved by hands whose names you'll never know. The air smells of rain and stone dust. There are no fences, no explanations, only shapes, echoes. A quiet that asks nothing of you but presence. You place your palm against a wall. The stone is cool, weathered. Its builders are gone, but their intent remains. They did not need to be famous. They only needed to be seen. Let them be seen. Not misnamed, not rewritten, just remembered. Not every culture needs to be lost. Some only need to be returned. And tonight, in the hush of sleep, you walk beside them. Not as an outsider, not as an archaeologist, but as a witness. Not everything hidden is gone. Sometimes it's just been waiting to be seen clearly for the first time. Some stories begin as truth, events witnessed, words spoken, a fire, a journey, a name, and then time passes. The edges blur. What was seen becomes what was told. What was told becomes what was remembered, and what was remembered becomes something else entirely. This is how myth is born, not through invention but through erosion. Fact doesn't vanish in an instant, it fades like stars behind gathering clouds. Not erased, just dimmed, still present but harder to see. Every culture has stories like this. Tales that began in lived experience but now sit just beyond reach, wrapped in wonder distorted by distance. In Greece there was once a war, perhaps a real one, fought over trade, over power, over pride. But time sculpted it into poetry. The city of Troy became legend. Achilles became immortal. The wooden horse rolled into history with a whisper of impossibility. What was once fact became Homer's song. And now, we call it myth. But beneath the verses, there are ruins. Stone walls where battles may have echoed. Charred layers where fire once raged. A memory disguised as a story. And in that story, truth lingers. In the Pacific, the people of Polynesia speak of Hawaii, a homeland across the waves now lost where their ancestors once lived. It's not found on any modern map. It has no fixed coordinates. But ask enough elders and they will point you toward it. Not with compasses, but with the stars in their eyes. Some scholars believe Hawaii may have been a real place, an island, long eroded by tide and time. Or perhaps it was many places, blended into one name, one symbol. Because over generations, places do not stay still. They become meaning. In West Africa, the griots sing of kingdoms that flourished in the Sahel, cities of scholars and kings. Some are known, Timbuktu, Gao, Jena, but others exist only in the music. The rhythm of names passed down, names never written but carried like flame in breath. And those songs remember things that no archive does. In the Andes, Inca myths speak of Paititi, a golden city hidden in the jungle. Was it real? Perhaps a memory of once prosperous towns before Spanish conquest scattered them. Or perhaps it was hope, a dream of what could never be taken. Stories often emerge not to explain what happened, but to preserve what mattered. Sometimes memory holds truth so tightly it crushes the details. And sometimes myth carries truth more gently than history ever could. But both are forms of remembrance. The danger is not in myth itself, but in forgetting where it came from. There are temples in Cambodia built before Angkor rose with carvings that resemble creatures we no longer know. Are they myths, symbols, or memories of real animals now gone? We cannot say for certain, but the carvings remain. And in Ireland, tales of Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth, speak of a place across the sea where time flows differently. Some say it was a story. Others say it was a distorted memory of early voyages west, a whisper of lands unknown, now known. Even in the United States, there are petroglyphs carved into stone canyons, spirals, shapes, beings. To modern eyes, they are mysteries. To those who carved them, they were language, prayer, memory etched into rock. But time has drifted between the meaning and the viewer, and now we guess. This gap between what was meant and what we see is where myth grows. It is not a flaw, it is a function of being human. Because memory was never meant to be precise, it was meant to survive, and sometimes survival comes through transformation. A city becomes a legend, a battle becomes a saga, a name becomes a ghost. Tonight, think of the stories you know, the ones you were told as a child, the ones whispered on long drives or around quiet tables. Do you know how they began? Or only how they made you feel? That feeling, the way your chest filled or your breath slowed, that is the myth's truest form. That is what endures. As sleep begins to fold around you, imagine a place you've never been but feel you've known forever. Maybe it has high towers, maybe it has forest paths, maybe it's quiet, golden, and just slightly out of focus. It doesn't matter if it was ever real. It matters that it lives in you. Because myth is not the opposite of fact. It is the shadow it casts. And in that shadow you find warmth. Between memory and myth is a space as wide as sleep. Soft, changing, and full of stars just waiting to reappear. Not everything that vanishes is gone. Not every silence is death. Some things are simply sleeping. It's a thought that settles gently at the edge of belief, like fog rolling over forgotten ground. These civilizations we've traced, these voices we've half heard, these mysteries we've walked through together. Perhaps they are not lost, not broken, not buried for good. Perhaps they are just resting. Beneath the soil, under layers of time and earth, entire cities lie intact. Walls still standing, chambers still holding air, rooms with bowls still on the floor, sandals by the doorway, a fire long cold in the hearth, as if the people within just stepped away, intending to return. But they never did. And yet when we find those places, it doesn't feel like uncovering death. It feels like stirring a dream. Something half-remembered rises from the ground. The lines of a city return. The breath of a life once lived exhales softly into ours. These are not ruins. They are slumbering stories. Dwarka beneath the sea, Derinkuyu beneath the rock, Doggerland beneath the waves, Mohenjo-Daro beneath the dust. All these names we have spoken, they do not sound like endings. They sound like echoes, like whispers through sleep. And what is sleep, if not a place between? A space where the conscious world steps aside and something older, quieter begins to stir. Civilizations sleep too. They curl into the folds of time. They slip into the cracks between pages. They tuck themselves beneath the rhythm of the present, waiting for someone to remember, waiting for a breath of dust to stir, waiting for a dreamer. Maybe that's why we find them at night, why stories of lost cities feel stronger in the dark, not because darkness hides truth, but because it humbles us enough to feel it. In daylight, we chase facts, but at night we listen. And when we listen, we hear the faint sound of civilization still breathing beneath our world. Not breathing as we do, but breathing as mountains breathe, as trees breathe, as memory breathes, slowly, quietly, persistently. Somewhere far below, a temple lies wrapped in roots. A mosaic rests face up in a field, its colors dulled, its meaning unspoken. A well gathers rain no one drinks. A city map exists only in the symmetry of buried walls, its streets aligned with stars no longer seen. Are these places gone, or simply turned inward? Sometimes it feels as though these cultures are not beneath us, but within us. Their shapes rise in our architecture, their rhythms echo in our rituals, their myths shape our metaphors. The spiral of Celtic stones becomes the swirl in our language. The sun motifs of Mesoamerican plazas appear on our logos. The quiet communal courtyards of forgotten villages become the way we gather without knowing why. We inherit more than blood. We inherit silence. We inherit ruins pressed into our DNA. And still, They dream. We dig them up not to awaken them, but to remember that they never truly left. A song written in a dead language is still a song. It hums beneath translation. It lives in the space between our understanding. A script no one reads still curves with intent. The ink might have faded, but the gesture remains. This is what it means to be not lost, but sleeping. And maybe, just maybe, we are the dream. We are the soft vision they left behind. The future they couldn't see but still hoped might come. A world where their stones are touched again, where their names are whispered aloud, even if mispronounced. And as long as we speak them, as long as we listen for them, they are not forgotten. There is a moment just before sleep when the world begins to shift. Familiarity fades, time stretches, and you feel something else. A presence, not of a person, but of depth. That is where these civilizations wait, not in books, not in ruins, but in that in-between place where silence holds meaning and stillness hums with memory. Tonight, as your eyes soften and your breath slows, imagine yourself walking through that space. Not past, not future, but layered. One time stacked atop another like stones, like dreams. You are barefoot on old flagstones. The air is cool with a scent of stone and something green. You hear water, wind, footsteps, not yours but not far. The city is here, not lit, not loud, but present. You cannot see it fully, but you feel it. Its shape rises behind your eyelids. Its voices speak in a language you somehow understand, though you've never heard it before. And in this place, no one is gone. They are only sleeping. Sleeping in names half remembered, in myths half believed, in places half dug. And if we are quiet, if we are still, we can walk among them. Not as visitors, but as descendants, as extensions of their unfinished breath. Because no dream ever ends. It only changes form. Civilizations may fall, but the story keeps dreaming, and so do we. Sleep now, not to forget, but to remember. Stone does not speak quickly. Its voice is slow, deep, and soft. It hums across centuries, carrying messages not in words, but in shape, in curve, in stillness. To most, a ruin is a silence, but to those who listen, it is a lullaby. Carvings, columns, shrines left to the sky. They are not just remnants. They are remnants singing, low and steady like wind through hollow bone. A melody shaped not for the ears, but for the memory of something older. Some stones tell stories in pictures, reliefs carved with gods, with animals, with scenes of harvest, of war, of quiet joy. Some are simple, spirals, dots, waves, not symbols to decipher, but rhythms to feel. You stand before an ancient wall. Its edges have softened with time. The faces once carved with pride are weathered but still watching. They are not trying to be understood. They are trying to be felt. And when the wind is still and the sky is quiet, you can feel it. The lullaby they left behind. At Göbekli Tepe in the highlands of southeastern Turkey, massive T-shaped pillars rise in deliberate circles, older than the wheel, older than writing. They are carved with animals, snakes, birds, lions. But there is no temple floor, no altars, only presence. It's as if the stones were meant to be listened to with the body, not the mind. And though we do not know their language, we know their intention. To gather, to connect, to hold. That is a kind of lullaby, too. In the caves of southern France, beneath layers of limestone and time, the walls bloom with painted hands. Red, ochre, some large, some small, pressed into the rock like signatures. These are not messages, they are gestures. I was here, we were here, remember us, a lullaby left for the future, for us, and we heard it, even if we do not know the names of the ones who sang it. Elsewhere in Japan's sacred forests, stone lanterns sit half swallowed by moss. their light long gone, but their silence full of memory. Each one marks a path, a prayer, a place where someone once stood and hoped the gods were listening. Maybe they still are. Stone can hold sadness, but it also holds warmth. A hand-shaped bowl, a bench carved smooth by generations, a threshold worn down by bare feet. These are not ruins. These are lullabies in stone. In Ireland, the ring forts curve across fields like quiet sentences. In Ethiopia, the rock-hewn churches dive deep into the earth, built down, not up, as if God might be found in the center of the world. In India, temples chiseled into cliff faces echo with breath, not sound. Pilgrims still arrive, not to speak, but to feel. Stone does not forget. Even when we build over it, even when we misname it, even when we stop believing, the sacred remains. It lingers in angles, in shadows, in cracks that hold rain just long enough to glisten. Some of the lullabies are unfinished, steles left half-carved, shrines never completed, walls that end too soon. But even those are whole in their incompletion, like a song hummed softly then trailed off. You don't need to hear the end. You only need to know someone began it. And perhaps, as you stand before these places, as you dream of them, you are singing the next verse. Because we carry their stories forward every time we trace our fingers across ancient walls. Every time we stand in awe of a monument no longer claimed. Every time we whisper a name we do not fully understand. Stone does not crumble without echo. It sings as it falls. It settles into memory. Tonight, imagine yourself in one of these spaces. Maybe it's a temple open to the stars. Maybe it's a ruin half covered in ivy. Maybe it's just a stone in a field, but one that holds something unspoken. You kneel beside it. You place your palm flat. It is cool, still, but not empty. There is a hum beneath your skin, a tone so low it feels like breath. It is not a song you recognize, but you do not need to. Because it was meant for you, for this moment, for this quiet. You close your eyes, and the stone sings, softly, steadily, like the earth breathing through its bones. This is how we are remembered, not through monuments, but through moments, through lullabies left behind. The stones have waited a long time, not to be found, but to be felt. Sleep now, and let the hum of forgotten hands rock you into stillness. There is nothing more ancient than silence. Before the first word, there was silence. Before the first city rose, there was silence. And when all things fade, when names are forgotten, when stones turn to dust, silence remains. It is not empty. It is not cold. It is full of everything not yet spoken, everything that never needed to be said. You have walked through time. You have stepped into sunken cities, passed beneath forgotten arches, and heard the echoes of civilizations not truly lost, only paused. You have listened to lullabies carved in stone, followed footprints in vanished sand, stood still in places where language has long since fallen quiet. And now, you are here, on the edge of sound, on the edge of sleep, at the threshold where mystery and dreaming become the same thing. You don't need to hold anything anymore. You don't need to solve the story. You don't need to ask what came next. Because there is peace in not knowing. There is peace in surrendering to the hush. Let the silence take you, not like an ending, but like a tide pulling you gently out to sea, where thoughts soften, where time slows, where you are no longer watching the world but floating inside it. There is a place beyond memory, not after it, but deeper than it, where names dissolve, where ruins fade into soil, where the only thing left is feeling, and even that becomes weightless. This is the silence where civilizations rest, where myth breathes without being spoken, where the earth holds its oldest dreams, and you are part of them now. You are not separate. You are not a visitor. You are woven into the quiet, just like the temples, just like the hands that carved stone, just like the winds that passed over forgotten cities and never asked for thanks. The silence doesn't rush you. It does not require your attention. It welcomes you without asking anything in return. This is where stories sleep, in the space between breath and stillness, in the pause between thoughts, in the darkness that is soft, not heavy, in the emptiness that is full of mystery, not absence. Let yourself dissolve into it. There is no border here, no shape to hold, only drifting, only the gentle unraveling of time. You are not remembering anymore. You are becoming memory, not in the way that fades, but in the way that lingers, like mist over ruins at dawn, like a footprint filled with rain, like a name carved into stone so long ago the letters no longer matter, but the curve of the hand still does. Even silence remembers that. Even the earth listens for it. Tonight you are not here to understand, you are here to rest, to join the long hush of history, to lie beside those who built the first homes, wrote the first myths, and watched their cities slowly become dreams. They are still dreaming. And now, so are you. Let the silence take you. Let it wrap around you like the ocean wraps sunken walls. Let it hold you the way soft earth holds seeds. Let it carry you into places with no names, where all that matters is breath, and even that is quiet. You don't need to listen anymore. The story will continue without words. It always has. And even in your sleep, you'll still be part of it. A quiet presence resting with the rest of them. Beneath the surface, beneath time, beneath sound. Let go now. Let go of the questions. Let go of the past. Let go of the light. And let the silence take you all the way down.